This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, a weekly, proudly progressive podcast radio show that we remind you that liberal is not a bad word. And at the beginning of every show, we normally share with you the news you may have missed around the country or that may not be getting enough attention. And we wanted to stick with that tradition this morning by talking about 26 deaths that have racked the entire country. Many of you may be thinking we're referring to the 26 deaths in Connecticut. However, I am not. We are not. I'm here to tell you about the 3 deaths in Birmingham, Alabama, 2 in Las Vegas, 1 in Boston, 1 in Westminster, 1 in Denver, a teen, 1 in Heflin, Alabama, a child, 1 in Riverside, California, 1 in Titusville, Florida, 1 dead in Holly Hill, Florida, 1 in Chicago, Illinois, 1 in Meigs County, Ohio, 1 dead in Pensacola, Florida, 1 dead in Fallon, Nevada, 1 in Faulkner County, Arkansas, 1 dead in Toledo, Ohio, 1 dead in Austin, Texas, 1 dead in Detroit, Michigan, 1 person dead in Greenville, South Carolina, another in Annapolis, Maryland, 1 more in Wichita, Kansas, 1 in Clover, South Carolina, 1 dead in Tacoma, Washington, and 1 more in Dallas, Texas. I normally say good morning, Shano, but I don't know if that news is worthy of a good morning.
Yeah, I've been racking my brains for a couple days now, and we started the show that way for a reason.
Yes.
That this is a tragedy what happened in Connecticut, and we're now having a conversation. A lot of people are about this tragedy, how to prevent it, what could have been done, what should be done, etc. The thing is this tragedy, in different ways, happens every single day, and we don't talk about it.
Absolutely. The 26 people that I just mentioned, none were related to police-involved incidents. Many were self-inflicted. Many were murder-suicides, drive-by shootings.
1 was in a hospital, I believe.
3 were in a hospital. That's the Birmingham, Alabama.
1 incident, though.
Yeah. But 26 deaths that happened in that same 48-hour period of the horrible Connecticut incident that we have heard so much about on the news. However, I don't think any of us have heard about these other 26 individuals that are victims of gunshot injuries.
No.
26 people. And it didn't take me too long to compile that list. That's
No.
the scary part.
No, because the averages, according to the CDC, in this country, 32 gunshot deaths a day.
Yes.
In this country.
26 right there. The same number of people, of lives that were lost in the Connecticut shooting that we have heard so much about on the news over this weekend, the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. And when 26 individuals of any age, race, color, creed, what have you, die in one incident, the news media picks up on it. But if people realize that that same number of lives are lost every single day in this country, you would think there would be more reporting on it.
And why isn't there?
Well, many of those incidents were in low-income areas, Many of those incidents were drive-by shootings or tragic murder-suicide events that, while they were a blip on the radar of their local news media, the national media was silent.
Or perhaps, news means information that's new. That happens every single day. It's not new when it happens every single day, and that's the sad part.
Yeah.
That's and we're going to get into this in a lot of detail. The sacrifice that our society is asked to make for this right that is so jealously protected by many, many people in this country. I'm not going to deny it, and it's in the Constitution.
Yes, it is. At least certain interpretations.
There's only one that matters.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that too.
Yes, we will get into that. But yeah, just to recap there, Birmingham, Las Vegas, Boston, Westminster, Denver, Heflin, Alabama, Riverside, California, Titusville, Florida, Holly Hill, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, Meigs County, Ohio, Pensacola, Florida, Fallon, Nevada, Faulkner County, Arkansas, Toledo, Ohio, Austin, Texas, Detroit, Michigan, Greenville, South Carolina, Annapolis, Maryland, Wichita, Kansas, Clover, South Carolina, Tacoma, Washington, and Dallas, Texas. You put those all together and you get the same number of victims as we saw as the tragic events unfolded at Sandy Hook Elementary. Yet nobody spoke of it.
One person did.
Dr. Eric Dyson. He really had a brilliant take on the subject of why most people don't cover it, and it's really in stark contrast, as we will show you, to those on the right that have a different opinion about the situation. 26
undiscovered,
deaths.
where no governor comes, where no president responds, where no school official speaks, where there is only hand-wringing and there's blame. There is cultural empathy generated around these kind of horrific events, rightfully so, and others bear the culture of stigma. They are blamed for their own duress. They are blamed for their own stress. They are blamed for their own failure, as if a moral culpability on their part has led to the consequence of their being shot or murdered or mugged or attacked or assaulted. That is something for which we have no words. And yet, as Melissa Harris Perry said, we want to build this moat. We want to say, oh, we want to have a response, a natural response to what appears to be a supernatural reality, when we can do the stuff we can do. Stop the flow of guns. Stop the ready accessibility of guns. And guess what? Black and brown communities deal with this trauma on an everyday basis, and they have nobody to speak for them and nobody to defend their children. And it's another tragedy that has to be acknowledged as well.
Well said, Dr. Dyson. And many people on the right and the left say that his statement is too extreme and that it's not just a racial issue and that nobody really blames low-income people or people of color or, certain ethnicities for being responsible for their own violence. However, during this presidential campaign, we clearly show otherwise, as Paul Ryan gleefully pointed out. Oh. Shane's pulling up the clip there, but many people remember Paul Ryan being asked about, what would...
To help charities and people in their communities help one another.
Does this country have a gun problem?
This country has a crime problem.
Not a gun problem.
No, I mean, if you take a look at the gun laws we have, I don't even think President Obama was proposing more gun laws. We have good, strong gun laws. We have to make sure. We have to make sure we enforce our laws. Yeah, we have lots of laws that aren't being properly enforced. We need to make sure we enforce these laws. But the best thing to help prevent violent crime in the inner cities is to bring opportunity in the inner cities, is to help people get out of poverty in the inner cities, is to help teach people good discipline, good character. That is civil society. That's what.
Good discipline, good character. That sure to me sounds like those people are responsible for the incidents that go on in their neighborhoods.
Exactly what Dr. Dyson was talking about.
It's exactly what he was talking about, that they don't have enough discipline and character to prevent these tragic events from unfolding.
Now, I don't disagree with where he started in terms of poverty.
Me neither. Me neither. A lot of the people on this list I just mentioned were not people of color, but almost all of them were people of poverty. It is an interesting correlation. Not causation, correlation.
I believe there may be causation as well.
Yeah. So for anybody who has somehow missed the news recently, of course, there was a mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. The shooter, Adam Lanza, apparently broke into the school, forced his way into the school, and took the lives of 20 children and 6 adults, 26 people, the same number of the list I read you at the beginning of this show. He was 20 years old and apparently had mental health issues that may or may not have been cared for. And it resulted in this horrific tragedy that there's just no words for. There's no explanation for. And as many news outlets that have been covering it, most people are probably sick of hearing the same talking points. So we are going to try and give you a different perspective, a different take on some of the news of this event, or at least we'll do our best.
Is there something positive that can come out of this? Despite the fact there are 32 of these deaths a day, does it unfortunately take something like this to have a rational, reasonable conversation about this, where the NRA just shuts the hell up, which they have done?
Yeah, surprisingly.
Not a word.
Not a single word. Not a tweet,
that
not a Facebook post, not a public statement.
I put up their Twitter again. Nothing on their website. I've not heard from an official representative. I believe their Facebook page was pulled down.
It's quite interesting.
Well, this is one of those things where if the NRA acts in a certain way, like they usually act to these things, they could go the way of Grover Norquist and Dick Morris.
Yeah, even Fox and Friends this morning, as we were getting ready to come into the studio this morning, even Fox and Friends was referring to more gun control.
They were talking about gun regulation. Usually they couch it in terms of gun rights.
It was really astounding to see them discussing increasing regulation on guns.
But isn't that a logical thing to talk about now?
Absolutely. We're going to get into that later in the show as well, with these false equivalencies we hear. That guns guns don't kill people, people kill people.
We have a case study in gun regulation as well.
Yes.
On this planet.
Yes.
In Australia.
Australia. Some very interesting statistics that we're going to get into. A decade without a mass shooting event.
After strict gun regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have a Second Amendment, though? No.
They are allowed to own weapons.
They are allowed to. Yes.
But their gun regulation is very similar to the assault weapons ban.
There is a question whether or not the assault weapons ban would be constitutional in light of what the court just articulated.
Yeah. So we understand that people are probably sick of hearing about the tragic details of Sandy Hook Elementary, so we are not going to get into the specifics of that over and over again.
Yeah,
people have had enough.
We'll leave that for Geraldo.
Exactly. We are going to talk about the issue, because if it isn't a time to talk about gun regulation and gun rights and the responsibility of ownership now, then I don't think there ever will be a good time. And we're also going to call out a few of the more offensive people on the right who feel now is a good time to call for more guns and less gun regulation. But hey, what's new? We're used to that around here.
And we'll have a few guests showing
We
us,
have
joining us.
Great guests coming up today. Karl Frisch of Bullfight Strategies, Cliff Schecter of Mayors Against Gun Violence, and the one and only Rude Pundit. We're very excited to talk to all three of them. And just to mention, if anybody normally listens to us over on WeAct, there are some technical difficulties this morning, so please check us out at SoFloRadio.com, TalkingLeft.com, or of course over on Ustream channel Radio or Not.
And if we can get the computers online over there, we will be on WeAct as soon as they are online over there.
Exactly. Hopefully.
It's early on Sunday.
Exactly. It's hard to get people in the studio. We are not at the WeAct studio, as many people know, but hopefully it's a big show regardless, and we'll have great guests and try not to talk about the tragic events that people are probably a little tired of hearing about.
It was Morgan Freeman, I think, who put out an opinion piece of just his thoughts. I don't know if he officially entitled it an opinion piece, but it's his opinion, so we'll call it that, saying turn off the TV.
Yeah, absolutely.
Turn off the TV, and instead of remembering the name of the shooter, just remember one name of one of the victims. Keep them in your thoughts, because these tragedies, they are happening far too often. One is too often, but far too often. And how many names do I remember from Columbine? How many names do I remember from Virginia Tech?
How many names do you remember from the Oregon Mall shooting last week? And just to mention to everybody, that list of 26 gun deaths that I read to you this morning, the 26 that were not affiliated with Sandy Hook Elementary, not a single one was from a mass shooting. None of them were from Sandy Hook or the Oregon Mall shooting or, these larger events. These were individual people, 26 individual people that died throughout the country due to gun violence, and nobody's talking about it. So we're going to talk about it here and get into the legislation, the policy, and the rhetoric. So don't go anywhere. This is Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and hopefully we'll make it a good morning for you. Stick around.
What kind of a crazy world is this?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Okay, astronaut, you're up. You'll be meeting with Wish Kid Brandon.
Roger, Brandon.
His wish is to see a space shuttle launch.
All systems are go. We are clear for liftoff.
This year, more than 27,000 children will be diagnosed with a life-threatening medical condition.
And Cowboy,
Yes, ma'am.
you'll be meeting with Shayla at a dude ranch in San Antonio.
Let's saddle up.
Some will miss school, some will miss time with their family and friends.
Princess, are you here?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for rescuing me from that evil witch.
Juliana wishes for a princess-themed room makeover.
That sounds magical.
But with your help, the Make-A-Wish Foundation can lift their spirits and give them a special kind of hope.
Pirate,
Yar!
you're up for Isaac's wish.
Aye, aye, Captain.
The wishes of thousands of children are waiting to come true.
You can help make my wish happen. Visit wish.org today.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at BigBrothersBigSisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Brad Friedman, your friendly citizen investigative blogger, journalist, troublemaker, muckraker, and all-around swell fellow from BradBlog.com. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. 1 hour of troublemaking and muckraking ripped from the pages of BradBlog.com and sometimes from the dark recesses of my mind. We'll have investigative interviews with newsmakers, we'll call out the liars, frauds, and phonies, and we'll even give kudos to the good guys if we can find any. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. We'll report on politics, elections, election reform, mainstream corporate media failure, media reform, global warming denialism, and everything before, during, and after. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday, now a full hour, 3 to 4 p.m., right here on Pacifica Radio's KPFK, and coast to coast and around the globe on kpfk.org.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Don't take your guns to town, son. Leave your guns at home, Bill. Don't take your guns to town. He drank his first.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Good choice of bumper music there, Shano. No more guns. Although you see those on the right actually advocating for more guns after an incident like Sandy Hook Elementary. One of the worst, Ann Coulter, of course, comes out stating that the Connecticut shooting could have been prevented by more concealed carry permits.
Well, it's just horrifying. It's ironic. We were just remarking on that shooting out in Portland how few victims there were. We're lucky the guy's gun jammed. This is a tremendous number, and it's a fact that there is only one policy that's been shown to reduce the incidence of multiple shootings. There are going to be crazy people in a country with 300 million people. Only one policy has reduced the incidence of these mass shootings and the number of casualties, and that is concealed carry permits. If you want to reduce the number of dead and the number of times this is going to happen in an area, I mean, you sort of sense this because they so often happen.
Actually, no, Anne. That's not a fact. That is the exact opposite of what the facts show. More guns do not lead to less violence. That is one of the many myths that we hear over and over and over again from the NRA and from the pro-gun parties. And we're going to go through each and every one of them, at least the most common ones that we hear, just like that one. First one being that Anne herself mentioned, more guns prevent these tragedies. However, a research study from Harvard clearly indicates the exact opposite. In fact, more guns lead to more homicide. It doesn't matter if it's in a high-income nation. More guns equals more homicide. It doesn't matter what state you're in. More guns equals more homicide. It doesn't matter. It's specific to even mass shootings that the states with the most lax gun control and the least requirements for weapons being carried have the highest rate of mass shootings. It's the exact opposite of what Ann Coulter said. And in this case, who should have been armed? The teachers? Next, they'll be saying that, kids should have a handgun in their lunchbox? Is she really advocating for that? Is that really what we want our kids to be exposed to? That you need to bring a gun to school in order to be safe? That the teacher should have a concealed weapon in order to prevent incidents like this? That's just one of the many myths we hear from the NRA and from, people like Ann Coulter. Some of the other ones we're going to get into, and we have the statistics to show that these are not true, that arming people actually prevents tragedies. it's kind of similar to what Ann was talking about, but a little bit of an offshoot, that the Second Amendment prevents any type of restriction on gun control. Also not true, but we can get into that in a few minutes. And gun regulation is unpopular. Also not true. We have the statistics to show that, in fact, is the opposite of the truth. And most importantly, and this is one of the NRA's favorite lines, after a tragedy is not the time to talk about gun control. Well, if not, then when?
They are certainly taking that to heart this time.
Oh, yes, they are. What have we heard from the NRA?
Crickets.
Crickets.
What other response can they have? Their response would be absolutely, I mean, there would be pitchforks and torches chasing them out of town.
Right.
There's not a lot they can do.
No.
And I'm glad, I have to say, this is the one time I agree with them. Say nothing.
Yeah, nothing is better than advocating more guns right now, as Ann Coulter thinks it's appropriate to do. That's about as classless as you can get. I wonder if she would say that to the parents that just lost those kids, or to the family members of the other 26 people that died in this country, the list I read off to you this morning. It's really a shame. But we're going to get into those myths and give you the facts, the statistics, to debate those gun-loving right-wingers and show how they're not accurate. We're going to be right back with that here on Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Stick around.
Hey, it's Hal Sparks from the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide, and this is Talking Left.
Lightning's flashing, winds are howling, and there's a tempest in the Tea Party. Why, it's Dick Armey, the blowhard former Republican majority leader, corporate lobbyist, Koch brothers retainer, and commanding general of the Tea Party Army. Dick's always been stormy. In 2002, he had an unpleasant split with his fellow legislative hucksters Newt Gingrich and Tom DeLay. So he spun through Congress's revolving door right into the K Street lobbying hustle. In 2004, he became honcho of a Koch-funded corporate front group with the spiffy name of Freedom Works, an outfit that works by hook and crook to free corporations from pollution rules, unions, taxes, and other bothers. Then, in 2009, when angry Tea Partiers exploded onto the scene, Army immediately rushed out to co-opt them, diverting their leaders away from the group's initial fury at Wall Street into a mob frenzy over Obamacare and big government. This corporate frontman and lifelong Washington insider essentially conscripted the helter-skelter bunch of outsiders into the Republican Party by providing Koch money, Freedom Works political operatives, and even writing their Tea Party manifesto. Slick. But now, Dick's dander is up again, and he's splitting from Freedom Works. He resigned with a testy email prohibiting the organization, quote, from using my name, image, or signature in any way. Like other ugly divorces, this one had its petty oddities. For example, Army's email insisted that Freedom Works must, quote, deliver the copy of my official congressional portrait to my home. This is Jim Hightower saying, in case you're worried about what'll happen next to poor Dick, don't. To move Army out as general of today's badly depleted Tea Party Army, Freedom Works will pay him $400,000 a year for the next 20 years. Slick.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
Angry protesting Michigan workers confronting police on Tuesday at Michigan State Capitol. Thousands of people gathered at Michigan State Capitol to protest final passage of the anti-union legislation known as Right to Work. Police pepper sprayed at least one person, and at least 2 pro-union protesters were arrested. About 12,000 people turned out to protest the attack on unions. The anti-union Tea Party group Americans for Prosperity erected a tent on the Capitol lawn, but it was torn down by protesters. This is what it sounded like as that tent came down. The so-called right-to-work law will be signed by Michigan Governor Rick Snyder very soon as the Republican-controlled government in Michigan rushes it through the lame duck session. This is the latest Republican Party attack on the organized power and rights of working people. Unions in Michigan, including the United Auto Workers, are vowing a protracted and powerful fight back against the politicians responsible for this anti-union attack. In more than 100 events coast to coast this week, working families called on their congressional representatives to reject cuts for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and to stop tax giveaways to the rich. The AFL-CIO says in a variety of ways, people sent the message to Congress to make the people's will crystal clear. From candlelight vigils to caroling to petition signatures and rallies, politicians were told to keep their hands off earned benefit programs that are vital to working people. Poll after poll demonstrates strong majorities of Americans want no cuts to Social Security and Medicare, while they do want the rich to be taxed more. Polls also show people blame Republicans more than Democrats or President Obama for the so-called fiscal cliff standoff. A Connecticut conference about attacks on civil liberties in the U.S. is leading to formation of a civil liberties solidarity network. Melinda Tuhus reports.
The conference theme was, "An injury to one is an injury to all," which harkened back to a 19th century labor slogan. John Woodruff, Jr., the Northeast International Rep for the United Electrical Workers Union, spoke on the morning panel that also featured representatives of an immigrants' rights group, Muslim Americans, a prison abolition group, and the American Civil Liberties Union.
The broader history of the labor movement, labor history in this country, has gone hand in hand with violent attacks on our civil liberties from our founding. Our union, the UE, was one of the first national unions to come out and say that you have rights, not only in this country, but in the union.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Hey, Dad, how do you throw a curveball? How do you build a fort? How do refrigerators run? How do fish learn how to swim?
Kids ask a lot of questions.
How high can you jump?
But you don't have to know every answer.
How many phone numbers are there?
Because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent.
How do cell phones work?
There are thousands of children in foster care who don't need every question answered.
What's electricity?
They just need you.
What's the moon made of?
For more information on how you can adopt, go to adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Of course, today we are talking about guns, gun violence, gun regulation, and of course, gun rhetoric in the wake of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. Thank you wherever you're listening, regardless of that being talkingleft.com, radioornot.com, SoFloRadio.com. And unfortunately, this morning we are not on We Act Radio, but we will be back. It's just a technical difficulty. And before the break, we were talking about myths that the NRA likes to perpetuate, like more guns don't lead to more violence. As I was saying before the break, that is just statistically the opposite of the truth. A great study by Harvard Injury Control Research Center from the Harvard School of Public Health indicates that no matter which way you look at the evidence, whether it be based on income, based on location, based on ethnicity, no matter how you look at that data, more guns correlates to more gun violence and more homicide. And these were case control studies, cross-sectional studies that were varied with different homes, cities, states, regions, men, women, etc., to see where the risk for homicide by gun increased. And what they found is, regardless of any of those different statistics changing, more guns did in fact lead to more homicide. So that was myth number one, easily disputable. And I don't know about you, but I'm much more comfortable quoting and referring to Harvard information about the subject than the NRA.
Are you saying the NRA has some kind of other agenda?
Oh,
Other than
just
our
maybe.
safety?
Just maybe. There may be a little bias there.
The fact that they don't support gun owners, they support gun ownership,
Yeah.
which, well, we'll get into that with Cliff, obviously.
Another one that they like to say, as we just heard from Ann Coulter, is that the best way to prevent these tragedies or to limit the deaths, limit the fatalities after or during a shooting like this, is to have more people armed, to have more people authorized to carry weapons. And in fact, that is not the case as well. There's a great article right now up at Mother Jones called More Guns, More Mass Shootings, Coincidence? And as usual, Mother Jones does an amazing job with the research and the information, compiling it and breaking it down for us. And in fact, through the 62 mass shootings they analyzed over the past 30 years, 62 mass shootings, they noticed one striking pattern that disproves Ann Coulter and the NRA's talking point. In not a single case was killing at the scene stopped by a civilian. Not a single case out of 62 mass shootings did a civilian having a weapon prevent a tragedy. Now, there were incidents where civilians had weapons at the scene. It's not a situation where out of those 62, nobody had a gun. They give examples. There were two shootings, school shootings, in fact, in Mississippi and Pennsylvania during the 1990s, in which there were bystanders with guns. In both cases, the person with the gun, yes, did subdue the shooter, but it was after the shooting had stopped. So it was after the person had stopped killing people. There was also the case in Tacoma, Washington, where Brendan McCown attempted to stop an assailant who was shooting at people. In fact, Mr. McCown ended up with several bullets in him as well and nearly died, spent weeks in the hospital recovering in a coma. And in that case, he also did not prevent any of the deaths at the scene. So not a single case out of 62 showed that somebody there that was armed could prevent a tragedy. I'd say that's a pretty clear indication that their talking point is not correct.
Yes, and they even go further to say just issuing, because if you listen carefully to what Ann Coulter said in that clip we played last segment, just having the concealed carry permits, they consider that a deterrent, like that someone, there might be a gun there, so I won't do this, which makes no sense either. First of all, you have to assume that the person who's doing this is acting rationally, which I believe everyone can pretty much conclude at this point, not happening. Yeah. And on top of it, what did that person do in Connecticut, the shooter? What did that person do? They shot themselves. And so most often, and I think we found this, is that it is an extended suicide.
Yes.
So there is no deterrent effect.
No. In many of these cases of a civilian being armed at the scene, it actually made the matter worse. Armed civilians, statistically speaking, according to the New York City Police, armed civilians attempting to intervene are actually more likely to increase bloodshed. Quote, this is a direct quote from the article, given that civilian shooters are less likely to hit their targets than police in these circumstances.
And how many times we hear about police missing, too?
Oh, yeah.
So this is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I have to say, when I was compiling this list of 2,600 other individuals that perished in gun shootings, there were several I did not include there because they were police-involved shootings.
Right.
Which we can have a whole nother show on. We can have a whole nother discussion on. But
I think this goes in to this show because, I mean, I don't know how far you want to get into this, but we've watched, and I think not just liberals, but also conservatives have complained about the hyper-militarization of our government.
Yeah.
Is that in response to the hyper-militarization of our people? That we have an arms race going on inside our country. And then it's time for not unilateral, but bilateral disarmament. Both sides.
Yeah.
Let's go back. I mean, go to England. Cops don't have guns. They don't need them. But now we have SWAT teams with snap bangs and machine guns and all kinds of crazy stuff. We have a militarized police force.
Well, and think about why they justify needing those weapons.
Because the weapons on the street are all the more deadly.
Exactly.
So is it time for a bilateral disarmament to make us all safer?
I think that it would be a great idea. Whether or not it's feasible is a whole different story. But
I say we shoot for the stars right now.
I think so. If not now, then when?
And I'm not saying this is not saying let's take advantage of a tragedy. And if anyone accuses us of that, go to heck, because we started with the 26 people who were killed outside of this. This should have been talked about before this tragedy.
Right.
And we'll talk about it after. We'll talk about it any time.
Yes.
Anytime a reasonable partner in negotiating this or dealing with this or coming up with solutions is willing to sit down and not just say, I get to have as many guns as I want at the cost of your children.
Well, and your excellent point there just debunked one of the NRA's favorite myths, and that is after a tragedy is not the time to talk about gun control.
It seems logical that they would have that conclusion.
Well, but
because that's when they have the least amount of political pull and least amount of sympathy for their cause.
But their argument is self-fulfilling, because what we showed you at the beginning of this show with this list of 26 other people that died in that same 48-hour period as a result of gun violence, it would never then be time to talk about gun control, because this is the number of people who die every day in our country as a result of gun violence. 26 other people. For
so
anybody
we have to find that one day where no one gets killed by guns.
Exactly, which will never exist until we get rid of guns.
Or highly regulate.
Highly regulate.
Although I'm not against. I'm probably really out there when it comes to this one, because you actually witnessed my debate on Thanksgiving night.
Yes, that was special. Interesting. It was special. Yes, one of their favorite other myths is the gun regulation is unpopular, but in fact that's not the case either. Even NRA members support reasonable gun regulation. Only the NRA policymakers are actually against it. When Americans are polled, including gun-owning Americans and NRA members, there are sensible gun regulations that everybody supports, including requiring criminal background checks on gun owners and gun shop employees. This second one seems pretty damn obvious to me, but just to state the obvious, prohibiting terrorist watch list members from owning guns. That's not a law in this country right now. Would you believe that?
No.
You can't fly on an airplane, but you can own a weapon. Really interesting. Mandating that gun owners tell police when their gun is stolen. Again, not already a law.
Depending on the state.
Right, but not a national law. 71% of non-NRA members support this measure. 64% of NRA members support it as well. Concealed carry permits should be restricted only to individuals who have completed a safety training course and are 21 and older. 74% of NRA members support the training. 63% support the age restriction. I think that's pretty clear. And another one I would think is pretty damned obvious. Concealed carry permits shouldn't be given to perpetrators of violent misdemeanors or individuals arrested for domestic violence. Again, not already a law.
It says arrested, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the sticking point on that one. Just to play the devil's advocate.
Okay. Can we make it then convicted?
I think it may be.
Well,
it does depend on the state. We're talking about 50 different sets of rules, and then you're talking about municipalities having their own rules on top of that.
But just to say that gun regulation is unpopular,
it's
wildly popular, even among NRA members.
NRA members are mourning the loss from this weekend as well.
Exactly. In all of these cases, the lowest outpouring of support, the lowest outpouring is 63%, and that's in reference to the age restriction. That is more than enough. That is more than the popular opinion. 63% support regulation. And of course, the right wing's favorite one, the Second Amendment prevents any restriction on guns. And Shane, you had some thoughts on this, public versus private.
Sure. Well, we have the Second Amendment. And that is indisputable. How it's read is high, a big bone of contention. People read it different ways. We know how the Supreme Court reads it. They have a recent decision saying militia membership is not the linchpin of the Second Amendment. So the individual right to bear arms attaches to the individual, not a militia. That makes regulation, it has to be pretty darn narrow, but it is possible. We can't restrict speech according to the First Amendment, but there are lots of restrictions.
Right.
The government can't search your property, but upon probable cause. But there's lots of exceptions. There are exceptions to every one of them for public policy purposes, for public welfare, for the general welfare. That there's a balancing.
Well, and to say that we're going to stick with the Constitution based on its original interpretation, the people who make that argument would have made the same argument or essentially are intentionally or unintentionally saying that then we should also accept slavery, women not having the right to vote.
Those were actually modified by amendment, though.
Right, but, why can't we modify Second Amendment?
We can, but wow, that would be a tough row to hoe.
Yeah.
I would. That's actually where I stand.
But
which I know is extreme.
I'm just saying that I don't think that the Second Amendment is clear in saying you can own AK-47s.
Well, we have the originalists who say go to the meaning of the words as they were defined at the time they were written. If you actually did that, the right to bear arms would be very specific arms, and those arms would consist of muskets.
Yeah. Hey, you want to own muskets? Go right ahead. It would be a lot more difficult.
If you really want to be an originalist.
Yay.
But the originalists all of a sudden find that the Constitution evolves, that they meant arms at that time, and could they contemplate the arms of this time, and would that fit within, because muskets were everywhere, and that was the common one, so what's the common one now?
Well, based on that logic, then if they were going to, apply it to modern interpretation, would they say that it's okay? Would they make the same rule? If you're going to change one portion of it to meet your needs, I can do the same.
Just saying their argument.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not saying it's...
So, anyhow, so those are the myths, and we have lots of information to dispute those facts. If anybody wants that information to debate their gun-loving right-wing family members, feel free to email me, and I'll send it
on. And I have to disagree with my lovely co-host. Not all people who love guns are right-wing.
I know, but...
I have many, many liberal family members who also enjoy shooting.
Yes, but how many of them are advocating that we need AK-47s?
That's a different argument. You're talking about degree here.
Okay. I'll.
I'm not saying you have to change your rhetoric. I'm just saying that not all gun lovers are right wingers.
I agree. I know plenty of people who are, gun-toting liberals, but they're not the ones usually advocating that we don't need any gun regulation.
Nor are a lot of the NRA members, as you pointed out.
Very well said. Touché. So anyhow, coming up next, we're going to talk about those false equivalencies. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. And some of the favorite lines used by NRA supporters. So we're going to be right back with that and more right here on Talking Left. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I've seen the show. It's excellent.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Are you living in a progressive talk void? If so, be sure to visit leftwingradiosstations.com. The state-by-state listing is a quick and easy way to find any left-wing talk radio station across America, from sea to shining sea. Your progressive talk nirvana is only a click away at leftwingradiosstations.com. Be sure to like Left Wing Radio Stations on Facebook and share it with your friends. LeftWingRadioStations.com. United we stand.
Hi, this is Brad Friedman, your friendly citizen, investigative blogger, journalist, troublemaker, muckraker, and all-around swell fellow from BradBlog.com. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. 1 hour of troublemaking and muckraking ripped from the pages of BradBlog.com and sometimes from the dark recesses of my mind. We'll have investigative interviews with newsmakers, we'll call out the liars, frauds, and phonies, and we'll even give kudos to the good guys if we can find any. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. We'll report on politics, elections, election reform, mainstream corporate media failure, media reform, global warming denialism, and everything before, during, and after. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday, now a full hour, 3 to 4 p.m. right here on Pacifica Radio's KPFK and coast to coast and around the globe on kpfk.org.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hi, this is Tom Harmon.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster of Take Action News.
I'm Brad Friedman of BradBlog.com.
Hi, I'm cartoonist and agent provocateur P.S. Mueller.
This is Nicole Bell of CrooksandLiars.com, and this is...
You're listening to
and watching
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
You can't have for-profit programming in the public good. That's a contradiction. Because realistically, if it's for the public good, then it can't also be for-profit. That's sort of the notion of why we need more PBS and NPR and nonprofit co-ops and whatever you can find in terms of nonprofit media. It's sort of what we're doing here. And, there's no real reason to make money off this, because if we did, it would really conflict with what we're saying.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
Arr, mateys. Welcome to the ocean. I've sailed the seven seas 100 times and found something I like even more than me treasure. 'Tis the ocean, beautiful and clear. Right now I be sailing over the Great Barrier Reef. It just shivers me timbers thinking of all the fish and coral below me. Wait, what's that floating by? A plastic bag? By Blackbeard's eye patch, that's disgusting. Why did you know that many of these things come from folks throwing them carelessly on the ground? It be true. Lend us a hand by always recycling and disposing of your trash properly. Boys, get the plank ready. Somebody's got to dive in and get that bag. Any volunteers? All right, fine. I'll do it myself. Cannonball! Find out what you can do to help keep the oceans healthy at keepoceansclean.org. Brought to you by the Keep Oceans Clean Alliance and the Ad Council.
SoFloRadio.com remains on the air with free archives thanks to the support of our listeners. Help keep us on the air by clicking the donate button on SoFloRadio.com. And thank you for your generous support.
Father, 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 help us, send some guidance from above. These people got me questioning. Where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love?
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. So we've been talking about guns, gun violence, gun myths, and of course we have to get to gun rhetoric, the false equivalencies. I know the one you saw recently, Shane, on the NRA was we didn't stop people from using airplanes after 9/11.
Yep.
Am I paraphrasing?
That's pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. But we sure as hell regulated them.
Sure, let's regulate guns like we do airplanes. What do you think of that, NRA?
I'm all for it.
Let's run through all the regulations we have on airplanes. I can't just walk out and fly an airplane right now above 1,000 feet, which is what's considered public airspace.
Nor can you walk out and even get on one.
Right, that's even just, yeah.
You can't even walk out and sit on an airplane without first having your name ran through some type of watch list, showing ID to make sure you are who you state you are, going through metal detectors and, the porn Chertoff scanners, possibly having your bag searched, and ensuring that you are not a threat to the individuals you're going to be flying with. And that's just to sit on an airplane. If you want to fly an airplane, you'd have to go through pilot school, register enough hours, prove that you're capable of handling an aircraft, register each of your flights with
the FAA.
The FAA.
If you're going above a certain...
Right. And, constantly submit to maintenance checks on your airplane to make sure it's safe.
You can't fly a plane drunk. There's a lot of states where you can have a concealed weapon drunk.
Yeah.
In a bar.
In fact, in a bar. Yeah, that's in one of the articles here. I don't know that I'd be able to find it that quickly, but yeah, in
I think it's Arizona.
I think it's more than just Arizona. The
It is,
scary
but
part.
Arizona is the one that sticks out in my brain.
And what's another one they like to say? Cars don't cause people to drive drunk, so we don't take away cars.
We do from people who drink and drive.
Yeah, we take away your right to drive a car if you prove that you're not handling one responsibly. I mean, if you were...
By the way, we register every car on the road. You have to have a license. You have to have a Social Security card to get a driver's license.
Or a green card.
Right.
I mean, just as an example, Shane and I, recently moved
Are there
to...
eye tests for owning guns? I don't know. Are there?
No.
There are for driving a car?
No, there's no eye test for owning a gun. So that means you can see. You may not even be able to see, but technically you'd be able to fire a gun. Awesome. Great. And what another one they like to say in response to assault weapons is, well, people just want to use those for hunting. Really? You need an AK-47 to hunt a deer?
When's the last time you came across 26 deer at a time?
In 2 minutes. It's just a bunch of nonsense. It's the typical nonsense we hear from the pro-gun NRA and the anti-gun regulation folks. And all of it is easily arguable. There is nothing wrong with more gun regulation. Many of us out there, especially some of us on the left, are perfectly happy with no guns, with taking away guns. But, the Democrats obviously don't like to make those threats.
Well, there are also a lot of, like I said in the last segment, there are pro-gun right Democrats. There are.
I know.
I know it bothers you.
What bothers me is there's nothing wrong with somebody having a handgun or a weapon used for self-defense. The line for me is drawn with assault weapons, with semi-automatics, things that allow these type of horrible events to take place.
And there's an interesting thing. A lot of these cases, what gun rights advocates come back with is, well, that particular law would not have prevented this particular event that we are talking about right now.
Of course.
But this is one of those ones where it would have.
Right. Like everybody
because
talking about...
Because the gun that was used would have been banned under the law that sunsetted in 2004. Now, I don't think it's a good argument when they use it and it doesn't apply. I don't think it's a good argument here because we're not talking about one specific incident.
No.
This is what's got everyone talking, but we're not just talking about this one.
Exactly.
At least not here on Talking Left.
So the question is, what can we do legally? And we're going to get into that and our take on it.
Or what we'd like to do legally.
Yeah, what we'd like to do. In just a few minutes here. This is Talking Left. Thank you for listening. If you missed any part of this show, of course, you can check it out at talkingleft.com or over on our free YouTube channel, YouTube/Talking Left. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
It's Tuesday, December 11, 2012.
This failure is a betrayal of the people in the Philippines and around the world that have faced climate impacts now.
I know some people will be disappointed and would want more.
Doha climate talks end with a whimper.
The weather in our country is making news tonight just in terms of sheer confusion.
Midwest weather whiplash. Enjoy snow skiing while you still can. Plus, sad news for the most famous wolf in Yellowstone National Park.
All of that and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We are incredibly disappointed.
What? Disappointed by the results of a UN climate conference? Who could have predicted it?
Why don't they get together earlier and start not accomplishing anything right now?
That's a good point.
Oh, yeah, we did. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Des, now that the UN climate conference in Doha, Qatar, however we say it, is finally over, more than a few folks, once again, are leaving disappointed, it seems.
Yes, indeed they are. But we'll have more on that in a moment. First, a few quick headlines. The U.S. saw record installations of solar power systems in both 2011 and 2012. That's according to a new report from GTM Research and the Solar Energy Industries Association. They say that in the second quarter of 2012, U.S. solar installations of photovoltaic power, mostly rooftop systems, jumped 116% over the same period last year.
I thought that was just a boutique energy that nobody really wanted.
That's only according to the fossil fuel industry.
Oh, okay, my confusion.
Depending on where you live, you may already know winter has arrived in places that are not used to seeing it, while it's late or a no-show entirely in a lot of places that should be feeling it already.
The wacky, record-breaking weather continues in the U.S. While Alabama saw a rare winter tornado over the weekend, the snow drought is now over for at least some parts of the Midwest. After breaking the record for the most days without snow in a single stretch, Minnesota's Twin Cities were hit with a record-breaking 10 inches of snow in one night.
Well, there you go. Global warming is over.
But Chicago was not so lucky, says Weather Channel meteorologist Mike Seidel.
Meanwhile, in Chicago, they can't buy a flake. It was 70 last week. Even a plow showed up, but it was not enough to keep them from breaking the record for the longest streak without snow at 280 days.
70 degrees in Chicago in the middle of December.
Yeah.
I retract my statement about global warming being over.
Yes, and you know, the problem with that is that another warm and dry Midwest winter this year has consequences. It will not help the record drought that still grips the Midwest and has cost billions of dollars in agricultural losses. And that new snow may be only a temporary reprieve for winter sports. A new report from the Natural Resources Defense Council analyzing recent snow conditions and the projected impacts of climate change on the billion-dollar winter sports industry has calculated that if current warm winter trends and low snowfall continue, 38 states could see economic and job losses costing the total U.S. economy up to $1.9 billion this year alone.
Once again, we see more billions in costs for global warming, and yet we still hear at the same time that we can't afford to do anything about it. Remarkable.
We are incredibly disappointed.
Despite a spate of studies in the last few weeks on rising sea levels, rising emissions, melting permafrost, and melting ice sheets indicating climate change is occurring faster than previously predicted by scientists, it was not enough to push world governments into acting on climate change, at least at the latest round of the United Nations climate negotiations that just concluded in Doha, Qatar. Developing nations and international environmental groups slammed the talks for failing to obtain new commitments from rich nations to cut their emissions of greenhouse gases, which scientists warn are necessary to avoid tipping the planet into dangerous climate destabilization. The executive director of Greenpeace International, Kumi Naidoo, was blunt, referring to the devastation in the Philippines just last week from Super Typhoon Bopha.
This failure is a betrayal of the people in the Philippines and around the world that have faced climate impacts now, today, and will continue in the days to come. But what is at stake here is selling down our children and grandchildren's futures.
But the UN convention did agree to extend the Kyoto Protocol through 2020, continuing the only current legally binding treaty for reducing emissions. But that only binds a handful of developed countries. The world's biggest emitters, the U.S., Canada, Russia, China, and India, are not part of Kyoto.
So the one thing that got accomplished, the U.S. had nothing to do with. Go figure.
That's absolutely correct. Finally, on Monday, Montana wildlife officials suspended all wolf hunting and trapping in areas bordering Yellowstone National Park after the most famous wolf in the park, an alpha female known as 832F by the scientists who tracked her, was shot to death by a hunter when she stepped outside the safe but invisible boundaries of the park. She was the 8th Yellowstone research wolf to be killed just this year, prompting Montana to suspend wolf hunts nearby.
Wow, thanks for that. For more on that and the other stories we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help sponsor the Green News Report. It's the year end, and we hope you'll think of us so we can stay on your public airwaves. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Surround you. In the morning, I'll call you. Send it farther on.
This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you are listening. SoFlo Radio, Talk Radio. I always go to Talk Radio 1. RadioOrNot.com, ProgressiveBlend.com. Of course, you may be checking out the podcast over on iTunes or the video podcast over on YouTube, all of which, of course, you can get for free at TalkingLeft.com. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Talking Left, and on Facebook at Talking Left with Danielle and Shano, because apparently Talking Left by itself was already taken.
I don't know if I actually created a URL for that even.
I think so.
I didn't. I can't remember.
I think I did. So, of course, this morning we've been talking about guns in general. I think everybody has had enough of hearing about the specifics of the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting. It was certainly a tragedy. Many children and adults lost their lives, and we're trying to focus this morning on what we do about it, how we change the statistics so that 32 people don't die as a result of gun violence in this country every single day.
And I already know the reaction to our next segment.
From?
Alex Jones.
Oh, yes.
Is being imploded. They've set up Homeland Security with 1.6 billion bullets. They want to start this civil war. People are not turning their guns in, you globalist frontmen. The mega banks openly brag that they've bankrupted America, and brag in our article that we have dozens of links to, where they say that they've taken over this country. World government's being announced, and they're coming after our guns. And notice these shootings are happening so opportune. Look at this. I have this giant stack of articles. We're going to do a second video with mainstream news over the years admitting Sirhan, and other events were mind control operations. I don't know if this one is, but I sure know they're not letting a good crisis go to waste, and they're exploiting this in a state that has some of the most draconian gun control laws in the country.
Used to.
Oh,
and I'm sick of it. All right, folks.
It's a mind control plot by the world government to come and take your guns. Wow.
Well, he's not sure if this one is yet.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and say somebody with that mental instability probably doesn't need to own guns.
Really?
Just
by the way,
going
doesn't know
out
the
on a limb
regulations. He
there.
might not pass the background check.
Exactly. I'm going to say that if there were a mental health screening involved, Alex Jones may not be given a weapon. But
that was for you, media, whatever the hell it is.
Alex Jones, the government is not coming to take your guns. Unfortunately, Obama...
We are.
Yeah.
Your neighbors are.
Obama has not had any increase in gun regulation, and in fact has allowed more guns to places that they were not previously allowed, has not reinstituted the assault weapons ban. But yes, Alex Jones, we're coming to take your guns if we can. Your neighbors,
if you shouldn't have them,
the parents of children nearby you have every right to be concerned of somebody mentally unstable having a weapon. They have every right to know that their child is safe, and I think that right trumps anyone's right to own a weapon.
Yeah, I've read a lot of opinion pieces in the last 24 hours. And a lot of people are making a very logical argument, but it's a sad argument. Pretty much saying we have a gun culture, we have a Second Amendment. This right is ingrained in our country, and these things are going to happen from time to time. We're going to mourn them, but then we're going to move on, and nothing's going to be done. And they have the evidence to prove this, that is what occurs.
Yes.
But they're saying we have this right, and this happens. So essentially what gun owners and the staunch advocates are saying is, my right to have a gun is worth your child's life. They're asking that you put your child up. What if we ask them, you have a child, gun owner, it's your gun or your child? Because they're asking that of other people. We don't know who. We don't know what the next tragedy is.
And it may not be that gun. It may not be that child. But statistics show that it will be somebody's child.
That it can happen. It does happen. So that is the quandary that, I mean, my head has been going around trying to figure out that if it was an easy solution, we'd have already made it. We'd have already done it. It's not. Politically, it's nearly impossible because of the money in politics. But then crafting a solution with the laws that we have and with the populace we have is really difficult too. But why not give it a try?
Yeah. Although the Supreme Court recently made that extremely more difficult.
Yeah, one could read that narrowly, though, to say that you can't ban guns.
But you sure can regulate them.
And the question is, to what extent?
Yes, in questioning whether citizens in the District of Columbia were allowed to possess handguns, of course, Justice Scalia delivered the opinion of the court, which can be summarized by stating, we consider that the prohibition of the possession of handguns violates the Second Amendment of the Constitution. So the Supreme Court has essentially upheld citizens' rights to own a handgun, own a weapon, stating that otherwise would be a violation of the Second Amendment, which will make it extremely more difficult to regulate, especially to ban guns in any areas, although they were successful in doing so in some areas like New York.
But they're not banned. There's not an outright ban. The hurdles that need to be cleared are so difficult. And that's the package that I'm proposing.
I think to ban them is not only a violation of some level of the Second Amendment, as much as my personal opinion would feel otherwise. Logically, yes, I think it's probably unrealistic to ever even talk about a complete ban on handguns.
Sure.
But I think going back to the assault weapons ban is not only good policy, but I think it's the best way to prevent many of these type of tragedies from occurring. And Australia's gun law reform clearly indicates that that's the case. In 1996, there was a massacre in Tasmania in which 35 people died. And in response, Australia's government united to remove semi-automatic and pump-action shotguns and rifles from civilian possession. So they went as far as apparently taking those type of guns out of the hands of civilians, which I think would be very difficult in our country. However, because of that reform, they have had a full decade, without a single, longer than that now. As of December of 2006, they had a decade without any mass shootings. And deaths from firearms and firearms suicides drastically were reduced. So, I mean, it clearly shows that regulation, especially of these high-round type of weapons, can really have an incredible impact.
Sure. And you'll get the counter argument back that any regulation you enact is not going to stop this. You know, we know that. We realize that. We're not stupid. It's not going to stop it completely. But if we can reduce it by half, by 75%, why not?
How about if it just takes away one mass shooting?
That would be great.
Wouldn't that make it worth it right there?
Arguably.
Just one. If 26 people in Connecticut or these other 26 that happen around the country, if one of those incidents was prevented by gun regulation, right there, wouldn't it be worth it?
If you're a humanist, but we're balancing still that awful balance between the person's right to own that gun and tragedies happening.
I think that there are plenty of weapons you can own that still allow you home protection, self-defense, that even for those crackpots that like to say, what if we need to rise up against the government, which is a whole nother issue, they allow all of those measures to remain. But you can still take, AK-47s and high capacity clips and rounds off of the market. You don't need, what are they called? The armor piercing bullets available to civilians.
Right.
Things like that. I think those are reasonable regulations to ask gun owners.
I've got my set of regulations aren't so reasonable.
Which are?
I've been working on this for now 24 hours, and I'm sure there's lots of problems with it, but I have a solution that gun rights advocates would hate. And it's pretty, I guess you would call it lefty or non-gun rights sensitive or whatever you want to call it. No ban on guns whatsoever. I mean, you can go with assault rifles and things like that. Essentially say that owning, as of 1 year from now, owning a firearm that is not licensed and permitted is illegal on a national law.
Specific, just to reiterate that statement, that is not licensed and permitted.
For the specific person. Any gun, I don't care, rifle, whatever it is, 1 year from now. And you have that year to declare all your guns, license all your guns, be permitted for your guns, and part of that permitting process is background checks, eye checks,
mental health checks,
training in terms of the safety and how it's stored. And if after that time you're found with one of those, it's 2 years in prison, federal. All right, so now we know where every gun is, every person who has a gun. Everyone who isn't then is illegal. And once found, lock them up. That will deter that we'll be able to get guns out of the hands of people who are not mentally stable, etc. Then we also impose what's called vicarious liability.
I think this is the real
if
something
you have
that
a
could
car,
make an impact.
if you own a car and you lend it to somebody and they go run somebody down, if you did that recklessly, not negligently, not like oops.
No, but say they
negligently-
told you, I need your car to go run somebody down.
Well, that's purposefully. Those laws already exist. But if they're a little messed up or they're in a bad mood or they're just something beyond, you didn't take what would be a reasonable precaution, that it was reasonably foreseeable that something bad might happen, you're liable for that car accident and for the injuries that happened. I propose the same thing for the guns. If someone steals it, you report the theft, no vicarious liability. But if you fail to lock up your gun and your neighbor gets in, who has the key to the front door, takes your guns, that's reckless. And you're liable. Vicarious liability. The right always talks about personal responsibility. How about some gun responsibility? And I know that most gun owners are responsible. They do lock them up because they know what can happen, but it's the people that are reckless that can cause some of these things that would cut down on this. And I know this is they'll say this is a huge infringement, but we're not banning guns.
No, although they would say that having a national registry will only allow the government to come and take their guns later.
Okay, you can be paranoid as you want. Fine.
I know.
And on top of it, they'll say, well, the federal government doesn't have this.
These
right.
are the same people that say, Agenda 21 is a mind control plot.
Right. Or that Sirhan was, mind controlled as well. And then you'll say, well, the federal government doesn't have this authority under the Constitution. No, they don't. Probably not. But that's fine. Well, stop. Let me finish. All you have to say is, just like highway funds, if you don't enact laws that fit this national standard, you lose 100% of your National Guard funding. You want a militia to protect your state? There it is. It's your unregulated guns. We're pulling out the National Guard funding.
Doesn't the Second Amendment state a well-regulated militia?
Well, yeah, and they'll leave it up to their citizens.
Well, I would consider that policy well-regulated.
Right, but they've disjointed. The Supreme Court has disjointed the militia.
I know. Just saying.
So there's my crazy idea. It would never pass anywhere.
You hippie, commie, socialist, liberal, you.
Yeah.
Okay. We got to run to a break, and we will be back with more right here on Talking Left with me, Danielle, and Shano. Don't go anywhere.
It reflects the drama of the human experience, and isn't that the essence of art?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without big brothers, big sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/cancer answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. In just a few minutes, we're going to be speaking with Cliff Schecter of Libertas LLC and Mayors Against Illegal Guns, a great coalition of mayors throughout the country that are trying to prevent deaths from illegal guns. One of the most notable members is, of course, Mayor Bloomberg, who, I'm sorry, he's a co-chair. And he released a statement after the Newtown, Connecticut shooting. I wanted to read it real quickly before we had a chance to speak with Cliff. It's a short statement. Mayor Bloomberg writes, "With all the carnage from gun violence in our country, it's still impossible to believe that a mass shooting could happen in a kindergarten class. It has come to that. Not even kindergartners learning their ABCs are safe. We heard after Columbine that it was too soon to talk about gun laws. We heard it after Virginia Tech, after Tucson and Aurora and Oak Creek, and now we are hearing it again. For every day we wait, 34 more people are murdered with guns. Today, many of them were 5-year-olds. President Obama rightly sent his heartfelt condolences to the families in Newtown. But the country needs him to send a bill to Congress to fix this problem. Calling for meaningful action is not enough. We need immediate action. We have heard all the rhetoric before. What we have not seen is leadership, not only from the White House and not from Congress. This must end today. This is a national tragedy and it demands a national response. My deepest sympathies are with the families of all those affected, and my determination to stop this madness is stronger than ever. Well said, Mr. Bloomberg. And that clearly represents what Mayors Against Illegal Guns stand for. Shane and I had the pleasure of watching an amazing presentation from Mayors Against Illegal Guns while we were at Netroots, and they really do a great job of highlighting the dangers and the damage of guns throughout our country.
And the solutions.
One of them, of course, gun registry and just gun regulation in general. And again, they're not advocating that all guns be taken off the street. Although, sometimes I am.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult, and faced with this, you want a big response.
Yeah.
But, we can incrementally work towards it, and we saw when it came to some of the negotiations that starting with a little further out and then moving in might be a better way of working on this because if you're going to just work on a bill that shortens clips and they put all their force on the opposition, puts all their force and all their money behind defeating that, and then it's, shortened by 2 bullets, where have you gotten? So
perhaps 2 lives that were saved. I mean, you have to start somewhere. It's the same as healthcare legislation or environmental legislation, continuing to say that because what we can accomplish isn't big enough, we shouldn't bother at all. And it's nonsense. I mean, yes, I know you're not.
I'm saying start more comprehensively with a bigger plan.
Exactly. Start somewhere. Start with some regulation. Because just in case anybody missed it, 26 other people died in that same period as these poor 20 children and 6 adults that died in Newtown, Connecticut. Just to recap this list: Birmingham, Alabama; Las Vegas; Boston; Westminster; Denver; Heflin, Alabama; Riverside, California; Titusville, Florida; Holly Hill, Florida; Chicago, Illinois; Meigs County, Ohio; Pensacola, Florida; Fallon, Nevada; Faulkner County, Arizona; Arkansas; Toledo, Ohio; Austin, Texas; Detroit, Michigan; Greenville, South Carolina; Annapolis, Maryland; Wichita, Kansas; Clover, South Carolina; Tacoma, Washington; and Dallas, Texas. During the same 48 hours that the news media has spent time talking about Newtown, Connecticut, 26 other people died of gun violence. And it is time for change in this country. And one of the people fighting for that is Cliff Schecter. We're going to talk to him next, right here on Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
So, who is responsible for these outrages? It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Big news, holiday travelers. American Airlines has a new family deal for you. If you and the kids are headed off to Grandma's house or wherever, American will seat you together. Well, yes, airlines have always done this, but the new part in American's family deal is this: you pay a fee for it. Being seated together is no longer a gracious service, but a calculated nickel and dime opportunity for the corporation to squeeze you. American calls this ripoff seat reservations, $25 each way. Of course, paying this corporate tax doesn't guarantee that your seats will actually stay attached to the plane. American, you might recall, had a rash of flights grounded in October due to the rather startling in-flight experience of passenger seats suddenly coming loose. At the time, the airline's executives rushed to suggest that disgruntled unions were behind this odd malfunction. Well, no. Internal documents have now revealed that the sabotage came right out of the executive suite. Having ordered a revised seating plan so they could charge additional fees for a bit of extra legroom, the geniuses at the top then tried to get the reinstallations done on the cheap. Rather than having their own highly skilled and experienced mechanics do the work, they outsourced it to low-wage non-union contractors. They, in turn, quote, misinterpreted American's maintenance manual, did incorrect installations of seats, and even had students doing some of the installations. Incredibly, Americans' hierarchy resorted to cold corporate think to rationalize their shoddy management. Our competitors do maintenance where it is most cost-effective, they explain, so we must similarly adapt. This is Jim Hightower saying, cost-effective? Fee-fi-fo-fum, I smell another fee coming on. You want safety? Hey, there's a fee for that.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says Michigan Governor Rick Snyder showed his true colors by signing the anti-union right-to-work law. Trumka says Snyder is a puppet of extreme donors willing to ignore his constituents and lie to the Michigan people. Trumka says the legislation will diminish every working man and woman in Michigan. Trumka says labor is resilient, though, and will continue to work to counteract anti-union attacks like that right-to-work law. Ullico, the union labor life insurance company, has closed its first infrastructure investment deal. Ullico CEO Edward Smith says 455 union jobs will be created in Rialto, California to improve water and wastewater infrastructure.
We will be very, very good citizens for the community in keeping their water rates low. We will get a very good return for our investors, which are union pension funds, and we'll create union jobs in the construction of the water treatment plant. We'll preserve and keep all those jobs operating the plant as union members.
A new book by Bill Fletcher Jr. takes a look at some major myths about unions, and the author weighs in on right-to-work legislation. Jesse Russell reports.
Labor activist and author Bill Fletcher Jr. is currently on tour promoting his new book, They're Bankrupting Us, and 20 other myths about unions. As the title suggests, the book addresses the numerous falsehoods that have been perpetuated about organized labor over the years. On Wednesday, Fletcher spoke with Workers Independent News about Michigan passing legislation that allows workers to benefit from unions without actually paying union dues. Fletcher said the push has nothing to do with creating a more democratic workplace.
It's not. It's about greed. And what the right wing understands is that they can play upon people's greed, selfishness, and individual circumstances, and say to them, "Well, you don't have to pay the union, but they have to represent you."
Fletcher said what the legislation does is make it difficult for unions to continue to function, thereby losing their ability to fight for preserving wages, benefits, and safety.
Now, the problem this creates for unions is that it means that your resources are being eaten up, in many cases by people who are not paying. The right wing knows this, and that's exactly why they're moving this. This has nothing to do with economic development. The living standard in every right-to-work state is lower than in states that are not right-to-work.
This newscast made possible in part through underwriting support from the National Association of Letter Carriers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It takes 12 years to create a graduate. It takes about the same time to create a dropout. And at the end of the day, the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be you. So United Way is asking you to make a pledge. Tutor a child who needs help. Mentor a kid who needs someone on their side. Volunteer to read to children. Because when a child advances, we all advance. Be a reader, tutor or mentor. Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United. Take the pledge now at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Joining us now, the one, the only Cliff Schecter of Libertas LLC and Mayors Against Illegal Guns. Cliff, Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your wisdom after such a horrific tragedy.
Thank you. I appreciate, not that I appreciate being on after something like this, but I appreciate your having me on. And just to be clear for people, I always like to make a distinction. I am a consultant for Mayors Against Illegal Guns, but when I come on these things, I'm speaking for me and not them.
Okay.
So I'll use their research, which is brilliant in what they said, but I just, let's just say I take a pretty hard-line position, and, it's not always exactly lined up with them. So there you go.
Fair enough. I think our positions probably wouldn't be as well. We've been advocating for some extreme measures in regards to gun control this morning. Where do you think we go from here? I think people are probably burned out on hearing about the tragic details of what took place at Sandy Hook Elementary. So we're trying to talk about solutions, about policy changes, and, what would really impact events like this. Where do we go from here?
There's a lot you can do. I think Bob Costas, before all this happened, thankfully just started a discussion about the gun culture in this country, where we, unlike other Western democracies, still glorify guns. We give them as the answer. We act like that. We still allow the National Rifle Association, Fox News, others that have been discredited on everything to push out theories that are not backed up by any single shred of evidence. That if you have a gun on you, you're more likely to be safe. University of Pennsylvania study will tell you that you're 4.5 times more likely to be killed by a gun if you're carrying a gun. Anybody who has common sense knows these things. The studies will back it up, but we all lose our tempers. We all have moments. We all do stupid things. And for a lot of people, if their guns there at that moment, things can happen that wouldn't otherwise happen. So laws are a part of it, because, right, laws, politics, pop culture, media, all this stuff ties into what shapes our culture. But we need to have the reason why the conversation everybody's talking about is so important is because we need to do what we've done with this is a public health issue, even though there are people that actually politicize this issue and often project as what the right always does, because they always accuse us of doing what they do. They turned this into 1977 when the hardliners at the NRA overthrew the more moderate leadership and decided that they were going to turn this into turn paranoia into a marketing scheme. They decided to make this a political issue. As other issues, it should be public health issues, like tobacco was a political issue because there are people that profited from it. Well, we decided that enough was enough, and we used the courts, and we used public opinion, and we brought out studies about secondhand smoke, and look what's happened and how that's changed. The culture, people have the right to smoke themselves, and I don't even begrudge them that, but they don't have the right to do it in a restaurant where I'm sitting next to them, and they don't have the right to do it around my kids. The turn of the century, there were spittoons in every bar. Right? It all looked like one big baseball game. The only place where you can still behave like that.
Yeah.
Scratch yourself and spit a lot. And I love baseball, by the way, but that's another subject. But that's the way it used to be, and there was shaming to the point where people were pushed away from it because of health concerns and other things. More obviously the easy one is cars.
Yeah.
What did we do? Seatbelts, drunk driving. A variety of things. People used to laugh and think it was funny to tell drunk driving jokes in the 1970s and 80s. Not so much anymore. So there's a lot you can do around guns and culture, but obviously there's very specific laws you can pass too. First of all, there's the Fixed Gun Checks Act, which was proposed by Mayors Against Illegal Guns, that would close the gun show loophole nationally, meaning that there would have to be a background check for every private sale of guns, with a few exceptions for old, antiques and things like that. And as importantly as that, you would have to share all the background records, because right now a lot of states don't turn in any records to the National Instant Background Check System run by the FBI, so that you've got people basically who've been adjudicated mentally unfit or have done something so that they shouldn't be able to get a gun, committed a crime, and they're still able to do. So what does this look like in practice? Here's what it looks like. Everybody has to go through a real background check. Well, you get people from Hezbollah not being able to buy guns, as they have been able to do here. You get John Patrick Bedell not being able to use the gun show loophole in Nevada to show up at the Pentagon and start shooting people. You get the Columbine killers not being able to send a friend of theirs in to buy 4 guns in an unregulated gun show in Colorado without any questions being asked or any suspicion, because they're buying 4 guns at the same time, like you have in the States, deciding why a child, someone barely 21, would need to do that.
Right.
You would, on the side of the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, you would have to share all these records, or you'd be heavily penalized, federal institutions and states. What would that look like? Well, the shooter at Virginia Tech had been adjudicated mentally ill and went to buy a gun. No red flag went up because Virginia had never bothered to share that record. You would have he would have been stopped. You would have Jared Loftner, who went and bought guns, tried to join the Army, who decided that he was a habitual drug user and couldn't get in. Well, that's one of the categories banned from buying guns under the 1968 Gun Control Act. What would have happened there? Well, as a federal institution, they should have shared that record. They never did. Had they shared it, he would have been flagged. We would have stopped him. I can go on and on.
Yeah, I mean, we can only speculate about the Sandy Hook incident, but it's pretty clear at this point that Adam Lanza had some mental health issues where, just like you said, if that record had been shared, perhaps he wouldn't have had access to guns. It looks like they were his mother's guns, but...
Yep. We don't know all the things yet, but there's also smart gun technology that the NRA has blocked because they just want to sell more guns, which would mean your fingerprints would determine who could use the gun. So nobody else could use your gun. It just wouldn't fire. There's micro-stamping, which the New York legislature tried to pass, and now will be harder because those bastards, switched over to the Republican side. It was only a Republican state Senate that stopped it last time around, which would make it so every bullet was traceable to a gun. So if you find casings at seams, you could trace it back to a gun, and you can find out there's so many things we could be doing. But, the one gun a month rule, which would have stopped a lot of these cases when people started bulk purchased guns. We used to, under the 1968 Gun Control Act, you were not allowed to buy ammunition across state lines, like James Holmes did, the murderer in Aurora. But he was able to do that, and in addition to that, his university, the cases of both Jared Loftner and James Holmes, there were people at their universities that determined they were a threat to the other students there. He was kicked, Loftner was kicked out of his university. I believe it was in California. I don't remember, it was a community college. I believe it was in Arizona. And James Holmes, the University of Denver, went and saw a psychiatrist or psychologist there who was compelled by law to actually share with the people, the heads of the university, that this guy could be a danger to the rest of the university. Well, in both of those cases, why weren't their names entered? If they were such dangers that they had to be kicked out of universities and people had to be warned that they were dangerous, why would that not have there be a record where they would have to prove their sanity to get a gun? I mean, these things are just simple.
Absolutely.
Everybody acts like this is difficult. This is not difficult. In most cases, people who commit these acts are either they're mentally ill or they're criminals who aren't very bright. And to act like, well, if we just pass gun control, it won't work, they'll get it illegally. Well, let's not pass any laws because people still rape people still steal stuff. The point is to make it harder. The point is to push stupid people into situations so they do things and get caught.
Yeah.
And we could do that.
And just to remind everybody, we are speaking with Cliff Schecter. Libertas LLC is his organization, libertas.com, and at Cliff Schecter on Twitter. So, right now we're seeing, as expected, those on the right who are saying if somebody had a weapon at the school, they could have prevented this tragedy. And this is something I think we hear so often when something like this occurs, is that, no, the problem is we need more guns. We were citing statistics that showed that really isn't the case. And I know you guys, you have certainly, talked about that as well, along with Mayors Against Illegal Guns. What are your thoughts on that? Someone at a school having a concealed weapon, would it have made any difference?
Sure, it would have made a difference. More likely, more people would have died. I mean, because not only anecdotally were the people that have been in these situations, Colin Goddard of Virginia Tech, who's a survivor, for example, who's a friend of mine, others will tell you that it's not a situation where people sanely fire in a direction and think. I mean, the military, under all sorts of pressure, has trouble, in these kinds of situations. People in the military, that's why there's friendly fire. These are very well-trained people. The police, it happens with them. They're very well trained. So now any Yahoo should be able to do that. You may remember in the Tucson incident, the person who was there who had a concealed weapon admitted on Rachel Maddow's show he came seconds away from shooting the wrong person because he actually was going to shoot the person subduing Jared Hoffner. And he made a decision in a split second there that could have changed things and changed his life and put him away forever.
Right.
Are we going to trust people? I mean, are we going to trust all teachers? Are we going to put teachers in that position? To begin with, and trust if teachers or students had guns, that this would work out differently. I mean, anybody will tell you in the Aurora case, when they start bringing this up, really, a dark movie theater full of noise, full of panicking people, The guy threw out, gas canisters or smoke canisters filled with smoke, and the rest. The guy's wearing body armor, but you're going to take him out. I mean, this is just stupidity. It's not realistic. We're not living in a Wyatt Earp fantasy here.
Right.
We're living in the real world. And every other country that's dealt with this, Australia after the Port Arthur massacre in 1996, for example, England after the Dunblane massacre in Scotland, these countries, they've dealt with this. And guess what? There were 13 incidents I think the 10 or 15 years before the Port Arthur massacre in 1996 in Australia, where these things had happened. Do you know what happened when they banned assault weapons over there?
A decade without mass shootings. We were talking about that earlier. Yeah, 18 mass shootings in the years before they finally, changed their gun laws in Australia, and then a decade without a single mass casualty event like we've seen here, 7 in the past 5 years, I believe, in the United States.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's just the specious claims on the other side are ridiculous. They're not backed up by anything. I mean, they've got their guy John Lott, a disgraced former University of Chicago professor, who has been caught creating, sock puppets online to tell him to say how great a guy he is from students, whose coding has been proven to be fraudulent. And this, they trot out guys like this every time. But again, I brought up the epidemiology study by the University of Pennsylvania. There was one done by Harvard University, too, and then there's many of these. I'm just picking a few of them. Yeah. And there's another one done by Harvard University. They'll tell you all the same stuff. They'll tell you where there are more guns, there's more homicide. Yep. They'll tell you across income and nations, it doesn't matter. More guns equals more homicide. They'll tell you across states where there are more guns. Louisiana has the most guns per capita. Hawaii has at least. Do you want to guess? I mean, who has fewer killings by a country mile? This stuff is just, they can try to throw this stuff out, but again, we're not living in a Wyatt Earp fantasy. Right? We're living in a real world. I've got 2 kids. I've got a 6-year-old and I've got a 3-year-old. My 6-year-old sits in the class of about 20 kids, kind of like the class that was massacred yesterday or the other day. Yeah. And it sickens me, not just as someone who's worked on this issue and cares about this issue, but as a parent. I mean, I want to, do people want to know what it was like for those kids in those final moments as they were being shot up to 11 times by a guy with a gun which he should have never had? I mean, when is enough here?
Yeah. And just to correct myself, I said 7 in the past 5 years. There was quite a few more in the past 5 years. 7 were in this year alone. Just going back through my research here, 7 mass shootings in 2012 alone. I think, if now's not a time to be having this discussion, when is? But I will say, Cliff Schecter, you citing some of the same research that we used, definitely makes me feel like we're on the right track here at Talking Left, because you know a thing or two about a thing or two.
A thing or two about stuff a little bit here and there. No, look, this is an issue that I've been passionate about for a long time. It seemed to me an issue that disappeared from the radar under false pretenses, because, again, if people want to go and look at another study, the Center for American Progress, done by someone who you maybe had on your show, which is Paul Waldman, brilliant guy, scholar, is a writer for the American Prospect now, did a study where he showed that the NRA has basically no effect on elections. It's all just a myth, like so many Washington myths, like the fiscal cliff and global warming isn't happening and stuff like that. It's a myth. They basically, they always support Republican incumbents, or at least the vast majority of the time, who are going to win anyhow. They spread their money so thin that it has no effect. This is a myth. It was proven this past election. 6 of 7 people Senate races, and most of them were in swing states or conservative states, like Indiana, like Ohio, like Missouri, where the NRA dumped over $100,000. They lost 6 of those 7 races. They dumped $12 million into trying to defeat Barack Obama, trying to show that he was evil on guns. Guess what? A poll conducted right afterwards in 3 swing states, North Carolina, Virginia, Colorado, found that people trusted, guess who, over the NRA on guns? Yeah. Barack Obama. Their money, and finally, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, with whom I consult, as I've said, one of the 2 mayors, who's in charge of it, who chairs it, Mayor Bloomberg, started a PAC, Independence PAC, to finally say, we're going to put money into this issue and not let the NRA dominate. Well, he went out in California and made a pretty strong statement when he took on Joe Baca, who was a blue dog Democrat, who was one of the guys the NRA could always go to co-sponsor any legislation they wanted with a Republican, because California's new system where the top 2 vote getters end up in a general election. And so there were 2 Democrats, and the other Democrat is much more progressive than he is on guns, and he got crushed by 12 points.
Yeah,
So the calculus is different. They can't get away with this anymore. They're going to pay for their votes the way they've tried to put the fear of God in people, even though they don't really have as big an effect as they pretend to have. But now, guess what? They're going to lose on this issue.
Yep, and polls after poll are clearly showing that. Cliff Schecter, thank you so much for sharing your brilliance with us. And, your voice is certainly one that has been constant and clear on this issue for some time, and we really appreciate you talking with us about such an important topic.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Have a great Sunday, Cliff. Thanks so much. Cliff Schecter, everybody. Cliff can be followed at, of course, Libertas. He is also a columnist for Al Jazeera English.
You can hear him on Sam Cedars' Majority Report.
Yes.
Often, usually Fridays.
Along with on We Act Radio with Take Action News. He's often a guest there, and you can follow him on Twitter at Cliff Schecter. He has been talking about this issue for some time, and he really, really knows what he is talking about. We are going to be back for just a few minutes before we get to Karl Frisch and Rude Pundit this morning, so don't go anywhere. This is Talking Left with me, Danielle, and Shano. Stick around.
Holy crap! We'll have more on these new developments after this.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Hi, friends. This is Tom Hartman.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks.
I'm Brad Friedman. I approve of Nicole Sandler's RadioOrNot.com.
Radio or Not.
Radio or Not.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to the Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Bill Maher, you're here in Miami on Friday night. You're doing a show at the Fillmore at the Jackie Gleason Theater. They just renamed this theater the Fillmore. And they put up a couple of psychedelic posters. So I guess...
Was it the theater Jackie did his TV show from?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
What I hear they did is put up two of those old Bill Graham posters and renamed it.
Yeah, I can't think of two different icons of show business.
Yeah, really.
Bill Graham and Jackie Gleason.
Yeah, why they just didn't play up the Jackie Gleason aspect, I don't know. But then again, this is South Florida.
Right. Okay.
Welcome to it.
I feel warm.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at RadioOrNot.com.
Hi, this is Kenny Pick from Turn Up the Night. Here are some of the hijinks you can expect from my show.
That right-wing Republican from Texas was only helping Dennis because he thought Dennis would be easier for Joe the plumber to beat than Ken.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, a pet rock would have been better candidate than Joe the plumber. I think he might actually have been a pet rock before he was a non-plumber. So, but he was a union pet rock. Never mind. Turn Up the Night with Kenny Pick, streaming live every Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern at Radio or Not, Talk Radio 1, Progressive Blend Radio, and KennyPick.com.
You know that the ice cream scoop has the power to make a child smile, and that by slowing us down, the traffic light can keep us going. You know that the golf tee brings friends together, that the mailbox keeps them connected. You know that the cataract laser helps you look to the future, while the pacemaker ensures that there's a future to be seen. You know that the lawnmower, the clothes dryer, and the elevator make life easier, that the blood bank makes life possible. You know that these things we count on every day started as ideas. But did you know all these ideas came from the minds of African Americans? Support minority education today so we don't miss out on the next big idea tomorrow. The United Negro College Fund, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Please visit uncf.org or call 1-800-332-UNCF. Brought to you by UNCF and the Ad Council.
The most important online radio station.
It's easier than ever to listen to SoFlo. On the air and everywhere. On any computer, any mobile device, iPhone, iTouch, and anywhere you are, just hit SoFloRadio.com. Tell your friends about South Florida's radio network, SoFloRadio.com.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shane Ho. You know, we were talking earlier about right-wing reactions to this event, and Shane, you said one really outrageous one just popped up on your radar? Oh.
Every mass killing of more than 3 people in recent history has been in a place where guns were prohibited. These guns, except for one, they choose this place. They know no one will be armed. You know, having been a judge and having reviewed photographs of these horrific scenes and knowing that children have these defensive wounds, gunshots through their arms and hands as they try to protect themselves, and hearing the heroic stories of the principal lunging, trying to protect Chris. I wish to God she had had an M4 in her office locked up, so when she heard gunfire, she pulls it out, and she didn't have to lunge heroically with nothing.
So, Louis Gohmert advocating with the typical response that more guns could have prevented this tragedy. Seriously?
Yep. Not just more guns, an M4.
Yes, because that's what every school needs now is an assault rifle. There is something seriously wrong with these people.
Yeah.
And, you know, he can say he's been a judge or he's witnessed, you know, these pictures, what have you. But study after study, as we've gone throughout this entire show, shows that lines like that are completely the opposite of the truth. Just again to recap, Mother Jones' article this morning, more guns, more mass shootings, coincidence. They analyzed 62 mass shootings, and in not a single case was the killing stopped by a civilian. And they definitely included incidents where civilians there had weapons and attempted to use them. Not a single case out of 62 mass shootings. I guess that is a fact. And I forget, facts have a liberal bias, as Louis Gohmert often shows. But to get into that and so much more, we'll be soliciting the help of the one and only Karl Frisch of Bullfight Strategies. He's coming up in the next segment, so don't go anywhere. This is Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we'll be right back with Karl Frisch.
It's Thursday, December 13, 2012.
If we would have been 5 seconds later, I think we would have been right in the middle of the fireball.
Massive natural gas pipeline explosion melts highway in West Virginia. More bad news for wolves, this time in Michigan. Plus, there they go again.
One person's stimulus is another person's wasteful spending.
House Republicans threaten to hold Hurricane Sandy disaster funds hostage.
All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The administration needs to be realistic and approve this pipeline immediately. It's about time we start laying pipe.
Just look it up on UrbanDictionary.com. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Des, this week Republicans in Michigan voted to put union workers on the endangered species list. What other trouble are they currently causing that puts them in today's Green News Report?
Well, right now it's more bad news for wolves in Michigan. Now, we reported on Tuesday the killing of Yellowstone National Park's most famous wolf by a hunter. Now, as you said, the Republican majority in the Michigan State Legislature has designated the American gray wolf as a game species in the state, just months after wolves were removed from the federal endangered species list.
Well, there must be a whole lot of wolves in Michigan if they're putting them on the game list.
Absolutely not. There's only about 700 that are believed to still survive in Michigan's Upper Peninsula.
Unbelievable.
A county judge in Texas has lifted a temporary restraining order halting construction of a portion of the southern leg of the Keystone XL pipeline. The East Texas landowner who sued the pipeline company TransCanada alleged that TransCanada lied to him and the state in claiming that crude oil would be transported in the pipeline rather than heavy Canadian tar tar sands diluted bitumen. In lifting the order, the judge said landowner Michael Bishop had, quote, raised some interesting questions, but had already accepted payment for allowing TransCanada to use his land and thus could have nothing else to stop it with.
So he's saying that TransCanada misled him about the type of oil that would be going through this pipeline, and in fact, this heavier tar sands oil, he didn't understand what it was?
He's arguing that diluted bitumen is not actually crude oil since it has to be processed when it comes out of the ground. So that's his basis.
Bitumen?
Yes, bitumen.
All right. Back to the Urban Dictionary, I guess.
Pipeline explosion in West Virginia.
If we would have been 5 seconds later, I think we would have been right in the middle of the fireball.
I thought someone was blowing up dynamite on the side of the road, honestly.
And just the ground coming up into the sky.
The National Transportation and Safety Board is investigating the cause of a massive explosion and fire on an interstate natural gas transmission pipeline on Tuesday. The fire was so intense it melted 4 lanes of a highway near Charleston, West Virginia. No deaths, but several residents were injured in the fire.
Chunks of mountainside and interstate flying with such force they actually crashed through the roof inside his house. Daryl knew he lived close to a transmission gas line, but exactly how close and the risks involved, well, he had no idea.
Watchdog groups say the increase in high-profile pipeline disasters in recent years indicates that federal pipeline safety inspections are unable to keep up with the increased volume in natural gas and oil production in the U.S. But as local station WSAZ reports, one resident has his own safety plan.
And that's to move as far away from gas lines now as possible.
Any massive wind farm disasters this week?
No, not recently.
Any terrible solar spills?
No, turns out not a one.
Imagine that.
And now a follow-up on the UN climate talks that ended this past weekend in Doha, Qatar. For the first time at the talks, poor nations pushed for a compensation fund for loss and damage from rich nations. They pointed to President Obama's request to Congress for $60 billion in Hurricane Sandy recovery funds. They say rich nations have both the capacity and the responsibility to assist poor nations in recovering from extreme weather disasters, which are predicted to become more powerful due to climate change. And since the poorest nations have not contributed historically to global emissions, yet will be impacted the most by global warming. But Republicans in the U.S. Congress are already threatening to hold Hurricane Sandy recovery funds hostage.
Of course they are.
Just as they did after Hurricane Irene and other recent disasters, House Republicans are already suggesting that any disaster relief funding should be offset by cuts elsewhere. Here's New Jersey Republican Representative Scott Garrett on CNBC.
We're at $239 billion in deficit, I think, the first couple of months of this year, and they're talking about adding $60 billion on top of that.
If New Jersey doesn't get that spend, even if it's a little bit wasteful, for heaven's sake, we're really going to be hurt.
Sure. So one person's stimulus is another person's wasteful spending.
A recent report from NASA concludes that every $1 spent on prevention saves New York City $4 in repairs.
Read about that and much more we couldn't get to today at our website, greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help support the Green News Report. It's the end of the year, so we hope you'll keep us in mind. Also, keep in mind you can download our reports anytime via iTunes, listen to us on your mobile device via Stitcher Radio, find us and like us on the Facebook, and follow us 24/7 on the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Have no pity, Jersey City once again will shine. With Homedale, Cape May, Phillipsburg, I like our state just fine. Jersey girls go do, 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 do. Everybody now.
This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. We are very excited about our next guest, Mr. Karl Frisch.
Karl. Karl Frisch. Bullfightstrategies.com.
Good morning, Karl. We wanted to make you feel right at home and had your jingle ready.
Good
How
morning.
you doing?
I'm well.
Thank
How are you?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for joining us today. Of course, we've been talking all morning about guns and the Sandy Hook incident, and just perhaps, people may be tired of hearing about it. But, do you have any thoughts on the subject?
I think people are tired of these incidents happening. I mean, the day, not even 24 hours after Sandy Hook, there was a shooting at a hospital in Alabama.
Yeah.
So, until we get serious about these issues, we're going to keep hearing about them.
Yeah, we actually read a list off this morning. I won't go through the whole thing, but of 26 other shootings, in states ranging from Alabama to Florida to Massachusetts to California, all throughout the country. But in that same 24 to 48 hour period, 26 other people died of gun violence. It's just because it's one here and one there, the media doesn't pick up on it like they do. Because of this news, I think we've all finally gotten a break from the Benghazi, Susan Rice, and Fiscal Cliff media over coverage. Do you think that it'll have any effect on, maybe these petty attacks? Do you think maybe these politicians will... No. Abrupt no. Why is that?
I mean, that's like thinking that you're going to find they're better angels or something. This is not going to happen. With Congress controlled by Republicans who are controlled by the NRA, I don't anticipate anything changing. Certainly not overnight, and certainly not before the 2014 elections.
You don't think it'll make them look petty to be, harping over Susan Rice or about tax cuts for millionaires after this many people perished?
Sure, it'll make them look petty, but I don't think that, they're not afraid of looking petty. I mean, just look at what they've done over the last several years.
Well said. Well said. Absolutely. And one point that I was just really, not to harp too much on the Sandy Hook thing. I'm sure people are weary about the coverage of it. But one point that I really wanted to get your take on, because you have a way of really cutting to the core on these kinds of issues, is the news that Westboro Baptist Church plans to protest at the victims' funerals of Sandy Hook. Have you heard this news yet?
If I believed in heaven and hell, there'd be a special place for them in hell, that's for sure. They're sick people, and they're weak-minded, and they go to these things for the shock value, and eventually their leader will die, and they'll stop going around, and eventually they'll fade out. It's a tiny little church with tiny little morality, and I'm not surprised. I'm sickened by it.
Yeah, exactly. Just to remind everybody, we are speaking with Karl Frisch. You can follow him on Twitter at karlfrisch.com. Of course, follow him on Twitter at Karl Frisch. Check out all his stuff at karlfrisch.com and bullfightstrategies.com. You've got too many sites to name, Karl. It's becoming a tongue twister this morning. So what else? The news has been solely Sandy Hook, and has really evaded any other subject. Do you have any thoughts on the nomination of, or news that John Kerry will be nominated for Secretary of State?
Well, I mean, if he's the best guy, nominate him. I'm sick of having these conversations about whether or not it'll be easy for us to keep the Senate seat. That shouldn't be a consideration for these appointments. The choice should be made on who the best person for the job is. If it's John Kerry, go nominate him, and then we can worry about the Senate seat after that. But I think John Kerry would make a great Secretary of State.
I do too.
And I think we have a decent shot at keeping that Senate seat.
I think so as well. I mean, I really think Scott Brown was a fluke, and voters there clearly showed they know better. But your take certainly is unique. That enough with the pandering over whether or not we'll lose the seat. That whoever's best, simply nominate that person.
But he's going to be, swift-voted again. I mean, Fox News did the day his name was first brought up.
Well, but
I think you'll actually see him sail through the Senate. Think of it this way. Senators have a very unique way of quashing controversy around their nominations. I think Fox News will talk about it, but I think he'll be done in a day. Look at John Ashcroft. I mean, that guy got friggin' nominated and appointed and approved for Attorney General in 48 hours.
So you don't think that the Senate or will block this nomination at all?
No.
Really?
Not at all. Not in the slightest.
I'm really surprised by that. I guess I'm caught up with that feeling that no matter what Obama does in legislation, no matter who he nominates, that they're just going to try and block it regardless. You don't think so
No.
in this case?
No, not this time. I mean, they already won what they wanted.
No, interesting. Do you think anything's going to come of the fiscal cliff nomination process? Excuse me. You can tell it's morning. Are we gonna get any real change in this?
Real change? No. I think we'll prevail in the fiscal cliff. But really, I mean, what this is about is it's about the debt ceiling in February. So I think, the Republicans will cave, and then they will use it to try and get leverage in the debt ceiling talks in February, late January, early February. Eventually the government will be shut down. Republicans will be to blame for it. And they'll do what Republicans did in the 90s, and they'll buckle and acquiesce to President Obama like they should. We will be delayed months from making progress, but ultimately that's what's going to happen, I think.
What will the damage be in the meantime, though? Because last time they did the playing chicken with the debt limit, our bonds were downgraded, et cetera. Will there be those types of
I'm sure all
economic
that stuff will
collateral damage?
I'm sure all that stuff will happen, but they don't care. So the president will be victorious, but not at no cost.
It really is. No matter how many times they do it, it's still astounding to me that they will hold the whole country hostage to get their way. It never ceases to amaze me, and I don't understand why I am still surprised by it. But yet I am. We have the fiscal cliff. We have Secretary of State. I mean, outside of that, it was pretty much a slow news week until this Sandy Hook incident, which has now just exploded in the media. You are a PR genius. Do you think at some point the coverage goes a little bit on too long, that it goes too far, like, say, interviewing children that were just witness to this horrible event?
I think coverage, it depends on what you think about it as. I mean, one of the things that you know is that, okay, well, we probably watch more news than other mortal people.
True.
A lot more. Most people don't watch any. And so while we see, wall-to-wall coverage as 6 hours of Sandy coverage, it might only be like 5 or 10 minutes to the average person.
That's all they tune in
the 5
for.
or 10 minutes that they catch when they pick it up. So, yeah, I think that generally speaking, the cable news folks, cover things to the extreme and somehow still get it wrong. I'd like to see more, diversity of topics and whatnot, but I don't see them changing anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it doesn't sit well with me when you see them interviewing children, but I guess that's a personal issue for me. Other people may be just fine with it. But, just to... I'm sorry, Shane, what?
Carl, you as a PR specialty guy, the NRA has been absolutely silent thus far since this event in Connecticut.
Actually, they did put out a tweet about their Facebook fans going up by 100,000.
Oh, okay. But on the incident itself, they've been well. First, their Facebook page went down. Well, actually, was offline, and I've been trying to check in on that. How is there a way they can respond to this that is still in line with what they call their values, or could this kind of like with Grover Norquist losing so much power? Could the NRA actually finally lose credibility if they come out too strong and be really the end of their political power?
I think they would run the risk of hurting their brand if they came out too strong on their own side. They've got plenty of people already doing their bidding right now. So I think they'll probably stay quiet and wait for the country to move on from this story.
Interesting. And I just wanted to get your take on Democratic Representative Gerald Nadler. You know, so many times from the people on the right, we hear that they're coming to take our guns. He came out specifically talking about the NRA and saying we need to wage war on the gun lobby, and specifically on the NRA. As a PR person, do you think that is going to hurt him politically?
It won't hurt him politically, but you know, I think part of the problem is that unless it actually happens, it won't sit well with people. People are willing to go along with things they disagree with as long as they believe that you believe it. So I honestly don't think it would be wise to take away every gun in this country, and I don't think that that's what any Democrat should be proposing. But I understand the anger and the frustration for people that support gun control, that we've never been able to have a serious conversation about it because we keep on being told that now is not the time. But, you know, unfortunately, there's not going to be a stop of these tragic incidents that would allow for time to have, for us to have those conversations.
Yeah. And in the couple minutes we have left, I just wanted to shift to something much more fun and lighthearted, and that is Stephanie Miller's Sexy Liberal Tour coming to D.C., and I hear you have an event scheduled, a meet and greet for that.
No, I'm just trying to help them sell the place out.
Oh.
I'd not scheduled anything for it, but I'm looking forward to them being in town. I've been to 3 or 4 of them already, and if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, go to sexyliberal.com and click the link to go get them, because it's going to be a great time.
Absolutely, and people can meet the one and only Karl Frisch if they attend, I presume.
Yeah, I'll probably wear a disguise though. So
we'll see you in the last time you opened for them in Boston, which was awesome that Shane and I got to see, and it was you did an amazing job.
Well, I opened for him in New York too. I think Jim and Chris are opening here, so that'll be fun too.
Yes, we are definitely looking forward to it. Karl, thank you for dealing with us so early in the morning when all of us are half asleep. You are certainly a saint for doing so.
No problem. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks. Karl Frisch, everybody. You can follow him on Twitter at Karl Frisch. You can check out karlfrisch.com. Of course, bullfightstrategies.com. He really knows his stuff, and he is awesome. So don't go anywhere. We're coming back with Rude Pundit in just a few minutes. If you haven't heard him before, you're definitely going to want to check out this interview. Stick around. This is Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we'll be right back.
And I just want to say, I think that was the most brilliant performance ever in the history of everything.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
There must be some kind of way out of here.
It's our last errand today, Jimmy. Just need to pick up some light bulbs.
Whoa, there's so many. Did Grandma tell you which ones to buy?
No, but check out the label on this package. It'll help us find the right bulbs.
Does it really matter?
Well, sure. The new light bulbs use a lot less energy, so we save money on our electric bill by using an energy-saving incandescent, CFL, or LED.
How about this bulb?
Let's see. We need to replace the 60-watt bulbs in our bedside lamps. That one is 800 lumens, so it should do the trick.
I've never heard of lumens.
Lumens tell us how bright the light is. The more lumens, the brighter the bulb.
You know, Grandpa, you're a pretty bright guy.
Yeah, you're pretty smart yourself, Jimmy.
Lumens, the new way to shop for light. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. That's EnergySavers.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Energy.
You may be hearing about people having trouble making mortgage payments and risking losing their homes. Many of them just aren't aware of the options that can prevent foreclosure. There are many options available to homeowners, such as repayment and forbearance plans, loan modifications, and even refinancing. Where does someone go for help? They should talk directly with their lender or a qualified HUD-approved counseling agency. Both can provide helpful information without charging a fee. According to PMI Mortgage Insurance Company, it's not a good idea to pay for services that you can get for free from a lender or a qualified nonprofit counseling agency. To learn more, visit homesafepmi.com or call HUD at 1-800-569-4287 for a counseling agency near you. That's 1-800-569-4287. This message is brought to you by PMI, supporting sustainable home ownership that strengthens communities.
Friends, David Schecter here, and all of us at WEAC Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hi, this is Tom Harmon.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schecter of Take Action News.
I'm Brad Friedman of BradBlog.com.
Hi, I'm cartoonist and agent provocateur P.S. Mueller.
This is Nicole Bell of CrooksandLiars.com, and this is...
You're listening to
and watching
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Great presidents aren't born, they are made. We've got to push people. They don't jump out in front of a parade if there's not a parade there. That is political suicide. The parade, metaphorically, already has to be in the streets with the picket signs saying, we need progressive talk in Portland, or we need marriage equality in Washington, or we need marijuana legalization in Colorado, you know, whatever.
Trans-Canada Pipeline.
Stop
the pipeline.
We have to push for our positions because they're not just going to out of thin air.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. A big thanks to our guests so far, Cliff Schecter and Karl Frisch. It is morning. It is Sunday. So good morning, everybody. Despite the horrible news about what happened in Newtown, Connecticut. Newton, Connecticut. Sorry. As I said, it's morning. I can't tell if you're going to say something up there.
Okay.
Oh, that's it? Okay. Coming up in just a few minutes, we are going to be speaking with the Rude Pundit. If anybody has not read his stuff, it's available at rudepundit.blogspot.com with a big not safe for work warning. He has been tweeting and commenting about...
It was his tweets yesterday that said, I really want to talk to him. You know, one of them I assume we'll start with is the first person who says that the solution to this would be to arm teachers needs to be, and then there's a bunch of things I can't say.
Yeah, bleep, 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 bleep.
He has strong opinions, is not afraid to voice them.
That would definitely be one way of describing Sir Dr. Rude Pundit.
Esquire.
Who is a doctor, by the way.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
And a professor.
Yes.
He's great, and an author.
An author. The Rude Pundit's Almanac is now available. You can get it over at rudepundit.blogspot.com and on Amazon.
Yeah, well, and also there's a 2012 update.
Yes.
Which is really cool.
So you definitely want to get that. You know, we've been talking about guns all day. And one thing I just found very interesting, of course, this week before the incident in Connecticut, much of the news coverage was focused on Michigan's right-to-work law. Well, not only did Michigan pass the right to work and repass the emergency financial managers legislation and anti-abortion legislation, but one day before the Connecticut mass shooting, Michigan legislature also passed a law allowing guns into classrooms. Well timed.
Yeah, it's amazing what that state legislature did in such a short period of time. And the gun rights advocates would say that's a great thing. See, it won't happen in Michigan.
Yeah. They've also made it much easier for adults to receive carry permits, and essentially anyone who has a carry permit is allowed to have a gun in schools, dorms, and classrooms and sporting stadiums. So great job, Michigan. In a matter of a week or two, they have undone so much democratic process.
Small d.
Yeah. It is interesting, though, totally on a tangent. Their right-to-work legislation may not be legal and is going to be subject to a court challenge because there is I don't have the article in front of me, but a committee that's supposed to oversee all employee rights in the states and all rules, including going through Congress.
The National Labor Relations Board, you mean?
Yes, are supposed to run through there. And they were not allowed to review the legislation before it passed, so it may make it illegal.
Interesting.
Yeah, something we'll have to keep an eye on.
There's a federal versus states' rights battle if I've ever seen one. That'll
Exactly.
be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I know we've been talking about guns, but sometimes you just mentally need a
There are other things
bit
going
of a break. Yes, and we're going to be talking to Rude about this whole tragedy and about his thoughts on the NRA in just a few minutes. So don't go anywhere. This is Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we're going to come right back with the one and only Rude Pundit, and we'll still be FCC compliant this time, but his blog never will be. Go check it out. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks from the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide, and you're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Michigan is no longer a state. It is now Michiganistan, an autocratic czardom in the hands of Emperor Rick Snyder. Formerly the Republican governor, he's now been enthroned by the GOP's lame duck legislative supermajority to rule with an iron fist. Democracy, rule of law, fairness, and the people be damned. Ironically, voters had given Snyder and his cohort of right-wing corporate ideologues a spanking for this kind of nastiness in a November referendum. The GOP cabal in Lansing had conspired last year to usurp the local authority of city governments and allow Snyder to send in unelected, unaccountable autocrats to fire elected officials and seize control. But last month, Michigan voters overthrew this absurdity. This month, however, Snyder and gang doubled down on their dumbfounding anti-democratic zealotry. With no warning, no hearings, no public input, no floor debate, and no time for citizens even to know what was happening, the same legislative czarist rammed a union-busting bill into law. Even though he had publicly rejected such a proposal earlier this year as being very divisive, Emperor Snyder gleefully signed this bill. Who's behind this madness? Say hello to two infamous anti-union billionaire plutocrats, the Koch brothers. They had funneled as much as $1 million into Snyder's 2010 gubernatorial election, and 3 Michigan front groups funded by the billionaire brothers have been aggressively pushing the exact same anti-worker proposal that the Republican thugs just bullied into law. This is Jim Hightower saying, 2 things not long for this world are dogs that chase cars and politicians who deceive and cheat the people. Already, Michiganders are organizing a petition drive for another referendum to overturn the law and return Michiganistan back to democratic rule.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Republican U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell is advocating cutting Social Security by reducing the annual cost of living adjustment, making you wait until age 67 to get Medicare, and capping Medicaid spending per person per year. All those proposals would hurt working people. The AFL-CIO says the so-called chained CPI Social Security cost of living adjustment change doesn't make it more accurate. It just lowers it for seniors struggling with ever higher prices, including higher health care costs. 250 economists have said there's no empirical basis for changing the Social Security cost of living formula. Raising the age of Medicare eligibility would actually increase the costs of the program, not lower them, and capping Medicaid just shifts the cost to states. For more information on what the proposed Republican cuts would mean for working families, go to aflcio.org/protectourfuture. Republicans at Michigan's legislature are thumbing their noses at voters who rejected emergency financial manager powers in November. Jesse Russell explains.
Emergency financial managers in Michigan could soon have the authority to unilaterally reject or terminate collectively bargained contracts. In November, Michigan voters tossed those powers out when they repealed by ballot PA4, but a brand new emergency financial manager bill passed this week could give those powers back. Republicans argued that the legislation is different from the rejected legislation and that it gives local authorities more of a say. It allows local officials the right to provide input in the decision over choosing an emergency financial manager. Local officials can also remove a manager if 2/3 vote in favor of removal. In the Assembly, one Republican sided with all the Democrats in passing the bill. The legislation that would allow the managers to once again throw out collectively bargained contracts comes on the heels of Michigan Republicans passing a right-to-work state bill, which diminishes the powers of labor organizations to represent workers.
Should the U.S. have universal automatic voter registration? AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka thinks that we should. Trumka says automatic voter registration is already the norm for most of the world's democracies. Trumka says the AFL-CIO and partners like the Brennan Center for Justice, Advancement Project, DEMOS, the NAACP, and the National Council of La Raza, among others, are working together to develop a strategy to achieve universal and automatic voter registration in the U.S. Workers Independent News is made possible in part through underwriting support from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers and from OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. It's kind of like an elephant is on my chest. I feel like I'm choking. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital.
You know how to react to their asthma attacks. Here's how to prevent them. Call 1-866-NO-ATTACKS. Visit www.noattacks.org or call your doctor, because even one attack is one too many.
I feel like a fish with no water.
Brought to you by the EPA and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. On the phone with us now is the Rude Pundit. If you have...
Leap up at the Rude Pundit. Pundit.
Good morning, Rude Pundit.
Good morning.
For anybody who is not familiar with the Rude Pundit, shame on you. And you can read all his colorful and interesting and brilliant posts at rudepundit.blogspot.com. One of which I was reading about one of our Supreme Court justices this morning. It seems, Rude, he may not be your favorite person. Did I interpret that correctly?
Oh, Scalia, no. Scalia is just a terrible human being. He wants to. I mean, the kindest thing you could say about Scalia is he's one of those people that takes somebody's hand and keeps hitting them with it and says, "Why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself?" as if daring you to try to stop him. And because many of the things he says is, "Well, if you don't like it, stop it." all the time. So the Congress should do this, or that the Constitution doesn't have it. But then he expresses disdain for the Bill of Rights and all the amendments to the Constitution. So yeah, he's just a jerk. By the way, what radio are we on? Do I need to keep it clean?
Yes, we are now. Sorry, we are now on We Act Radio, 1480 AM in Washington D.C. Of course, there is a technical difficulty morning, so we probably are, but we are still on all of our other online stations.
That's all right. Well, good morning.
Can I tell you about Scalia? Since moving up to D.C., I've been covering the Supreme Court. And going in for all the arguments I get to watch him on a nearly, I see him at least 6 times a month now, and he's no better in person. He
just looks like the biggest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Words fail.
Insert expletive here is what I like to say.
We'll go a-hole.
Yeah, that's fine. I say jerk face, and I usually tell listeners, insert your favorite expletive in place of this word. Wherever you hear jerk face, you can put your favorite word in there.
Insert your favorite genitalia.
Exactly. I think it's really interesting. You write, much of which I cannot read, but everybody can go and check out Antonin Scalia Doesn't Give a Damn About Your Little Problems over on rudepundit.blogspot.com. It's really interesting that you quote him not caring about the amendments, to essentially thinking that they are useless, while at the same time, I hold here in my hand a Supreme Court case where he considers the Second Amendment pretty damn useful. It's really interesting how that works, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. I think that the Bill of Rights works. It seems to only be helpful if people want to be total jerks. And so he was a big proponent he was one. Didn't he write the decision that struck down the D.C. law?
Yes, he did.
It's the hypocrisy of the right constantly. And in the wake of one of my first thoughts after the massacre in Newtown was even if we put aside the well-regulated militia part of the Second Amendment, which just seems to have been deleted in interpretations of it, it only says to keep and bear arms. It says nothing about buying and selling. So that seems to be something that is left to Congress to regulate the commerce of guns. And that's where they can step in and say, we're not violating the Second Amendment. We're doing our jobs as the Constitution says we're supposed to.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yes, very much.
And actually, I have an old clip. I just found this. Seriously, we hadn't even talked about this before the show, but check this out. This is Justice Scalia on bazookas.
Oh, you have this?
Let's hear it.
But I suppose there are handheld rocket launchers that can bring down airplanes that will have to be, it'll have to be decided.
How do you decide that if you're a textualist?
Very carefully. My starting point and probably my ending point will be what limitations are within the understood limitations that the society had at the time. They had some limitations on the nature of arms that could be borne. So we'll see what those limitations are as applied to modern weapons.
But even there, he says the nature that could be born, that so he's not using the word buy and sell.
Right. True.
So that I think is the line of attack.
Yeah.
Because it completely goes around it. And I'm sorry, you would have to have the most contorted definitions of keep and bear to include buy and sell and market in order to make it have to fit into the second and the most liberal interpretation of the Second Amendment.
That is an absolutely brilliant anecdote on the Second Amendment that I don't think anybody ever hears, anybody ever says. I mean, leave it to Rude Pundit to really get to the heart of the issue. That's really, really, really brilliant. I'm interested in your take, as I witnessed on your Twitter account, your thoughts on those saying the solution to this problem and those like it is to arm more people, that teachers now should have weapons to protect the children. Your Twitter feed shows that you did not take kindly to that idea.
No, and it's funny that what was it? Louis Gohmert, who's everybody's favorite, Yahoo representative from Texas, said that imagine if a teacher had an M4 locked in locked up, that teacher could have gone and gotten it out of the closet that they keep it locked in, and then gone after Lanza. And I just thought, wow. So really, considering the computers that get stolen from schools, you want to keep a locked up M4 rifle in there? It's absurd. It's as if telling a group of alcoholics, you know what'll really help you? Drinking more, and then driving.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting interpretation that I hadn't thought of. But yeah, that's like, oh, drunk drivers. I think we should give them a bigger car.
Right. Yeah. It's the stupidity. I was thinking. I was funny. I was looking up. If I go to a farm store, okay, if I go to a farm store and I'm buying fertilizer, say I happen to own a farm. Let's go into deep fantasy land.
Okay.
And if I buy fertilizer, if it's a certain kind of fertilizer, if I'm buying a lot of it, and I don't happen to mention that it's for an agricultural purpose, because guys at farm, I guess if you go to the farm store, you're always talking about what you're farming. But if I happen to be a quiet farmer, and then that is one of the things that the FBI has told farm stores is something that they should probably think about alerting authorities to, and that law enforcement will probably need to question that person, me, to make sure I'm not going to then use that particular fertilizer to make some kind of bomb. Okay? But if your doctor asks you, do you have guns? And you say yes, and the doctor thinks, well, you've got mental problems, maybe you shouldn't have guns, that doctor is forbidden by law from reporting you to say, yeah, or even keeping a record of it. The Affordable Care Act has a whole section about how records on people's gun ownership cannot be kept. It's another startling thing that there's a whole section of the Affordable Care Act. That's
we are, just to remind everybody, talking with Rude Pundit. You can follow him on Twitter at Rude Pundit and check out his site at rudepundit.blogspot.com. That they took that legislation even further and said that parents with small children in the house, one of the standard questions doctors used to ask are, do you have guns? So that they could explain the dangers of guns and explain the importance of keeping them locked up and trigger locks and et cetera, et cetera. And now there's been legislation to try and outlaw doctors just from asking that question.
Right, and I think that it was passed in Florida, but that law was struck down by a Bush-appointed judge, a George W. Bush-appointed judge, saying that it's actually saying that First Amendment trumps Second Amendment in this case because nobody is preventing you from having a gun. They're just asking a question. So, I mean, it's our insanity about guns in this country, the way in which our country has been manipulated by the NRA, that the way that there are members of Congress that are just owned by the NRA. It makes us. It's just one of those things that makes us a savage third world country.
Absolutely.
If we heard about these things going on in other countries, that there are nearly daily shootings going on, we would think, God, why aren't we? Why would you even want to travel to that country?
Yeah, that's very, very astute. We read a list this morning at the beginning of the show of 26 other gunshot deaths that have occurred in the last 48 hours, since the Sandy Hook tragedy. 26 other deaths of completely separate incidents where, yes, it's one death here or two deaths there or three deaths as in Birmingham, Alabama. But it took me less than a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, to compile a list of 26 other individuals that died in the last 48 hours from gun-related deaths.
And that's probably not all of them.
Oh, absolutely not. I was specifically trying to find the number 26 to, prove a point in relation to the Sandy Hook.
To equal the Sandy Hook total.
Right.
Yeah.
How are those events not equal, but yet we don't get coverage of one as opposed to the other?
Right, right. And and I love just the arguments that the gun nuts have. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to call them the pro-gun people or anything like that. I'm going to call them the gun nuts. Because if you believe that you should have a military-style assault weapon, I mean, if you are going into the military, you have to undergo, before they accept you, you have to undergo a psychological evaluation. And they can decide, well, this guy's too crazy. We're not taking him because we don't want to put a gun in his hands. But you can get nearly the same weapon by filling out a form and waiting a little while, depending on what state you're in.
Yeah. In some states, not even having to require to do that.
Right. And so, just the instantaneous background check. As long as you've committed no crimes, you're good. But the military is smart enough to say, we're not going to put these guns in the hands of crazy people. Yet we will allow not only crazy people to buy guns but allow their families to have large amounts of guns. What did the mother of Adam Lanza? She had 6 guns, I think, 7 guns in the house.
Yeah,
and including several military-style assault rifles. Absurd. Just ridiculous.
Absolutely. I think it definitely is eye-opening of what we need to change in this country. And, you referred to the NRA, of course, the National Rifle Association that buys politicians to do its bidding. They have been unusually silent since the Sandy Hook incident, as only the Rude Pundit can do. Do you think they're a little afraid to talk about this issue?
I think that they are crapping themselves in a corner, and I also think they've got their dirty little minds out trying to figure out how do we express sympathy but make sure that everybody thinks this was just a crazy guy. And the insult to injury to all of this is, and I don't know if you've brought this up yet, but that on the same day in China, there was a guy who went into a school there, and he had a knife because personal handgun ownership, is pretty much banned in China.
Yep.
And he injured 22 kids. On any other day, we'd have looked at that and gone, "That's terrible," but at least the parents there can say, "Well, he didn't have a gun."
Yeah. At least those children survived, as opposed to the children in this case.
And thus, China has the moral high ground on us.
Wow, that is almost enough to give you goosebumps in not a good and thrill up my leg kind of way. Oh, in response to such a tragic event, we are very glad that you could join us, Rude, and, add a little bit of brevity as much as can possibly be done after a situation like this, and just thank you. Yeah, I said levity. I said brevity. I meant levity.
I felt I went on for a little while.
Humana.
Yeah.
Yes, but thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and for getting up so early on a Sunday with us. Thank you, and we look forward to talking to you again soon, I hope.
All right, you bet.
Thanks. Rude Pundit, everybody, who is, yes, levity, not brevity. You can check out all his great stuff at rudepundit.blogspot.com. It is not safe for work, but you will laugh your bleep off. And
it depends on where you work.
Yes, exactly. That's true. It might be encouraged in some workplaces.
Yeah.
So we will be right back with the last few minutes of Talking Left on this Sunday morning. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
It's just implied, but we all know what's going on in this thought bubble. The kids don't know, but we do.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Hi, Hi, this is Tim Cormall from The Tim Cormall Show. Join me and my guests most weeks for a progressive roundtable discussion about politics, news, and other fun topics. We laugh a lot about the hilarious antics of the right-wing nutjobs, as well as have serious discussions about issues affecting all of our lives. You can check out The Tim Cormall Show at timcormall.com, and you can subscribe to the show for free in iTunes by searching for The Tim Cormall Show. You can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Tim Cormall. That's CORRIMAL. So come on over and join in the fun at timcormall.com.
Filter-free radio.
Filter-free radio. Filter-free radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean. With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Make your voice heard. Unfiltered. Call the Filter-Free Radio comment line at any time. 202-6979-FFR. That's 202-6979-337.
I want to know what you think the most important issue is now moving forward. Is it climate change? Is it the economy? Is it jobs? The debt? What do you think is the number one issue? Is it single-payer for-profit healthcare? Is it the prison industrial complex? I think the number one issue is finding identity, and I want to say that as neutral as possible because I believe everyone everywhere needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror and say, am I going to be part of the people who come up with a sustainable energy solution that's conscious of climate change? Are we going to be the party that comes up with a real solution to the economy?
FilterFreeRadio.com. You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to the Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Your view is not being represented in this country because all of our views have been corrupted by money and politics. Remember, 94% of the time, the candidate who raises the most money wins.
That's the fact that we need to drive home constantly. It's all about the money. Dylan Radigan, you rock.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime.
7,000 high school students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. So here's a 26-second message of encouragement.
Hi, I'm Stacy. Look, I've been there. It's tough. And I just want to say, if you find yourself feeling negative, use it as motivation. Let it be like the fuel in the fire to keep you going. Because the best is yet to come. Seriously, you're capable of great things you probably haven't even dreamed of yet. So don't quit now. See you at graduation.
Do you have 26 seconds to convince a student to stay at their desk? Now you can share your message of support at boostup.org. We can keep students in school. Visit boostup.org and take the first step. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
Hey, Dad, how do you throw a curveball? How do you build a fort? How do refrigerators run? How do fish learn how to swim?
Kids ask a lot of questions.
How high can you jump?
But you don't have to know every answer.
How many phone numbers are there?
Because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent.
How do cell phones work?
There are thousands of children in foster care who don't need every question answered.
What's electricity?
They just need you.
What's the moon made of?
For more information on how you can adopt, go to adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
The most important online radio station.
It's easier than ever to listen to SoFlo. On the air and everywhere. On any computer, any mobile device, iPhone, iTouch, and anywhere you are, just hit SoFloRadio.com. Tell your friends about South Florida's radio network, SoFloRadio.com.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to the last few minutes of Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Want to remind everybody to go and check out the sites of our great guests. Cliff Schecter, you can find all his stuff at Libertas LLC, as well as Al Jazeera English, Huffington Post, and more. Karl Frisch at Bullfight Strategies and karlfrisch.com. And, of course, Rude Pundit at rudepundit.blogspot.com. Funny stuff if you have not checked him out before. The beginning of the show, we opened by talking about 26 people who passed away in the past 48 hours. 26 people who died of gunshot injuries that were not part of the Newton, Connecticut shooting. 3 dead in Birmingham, Alabama, 2 in Las Vegas, 1 in Boston, 1 in Westminster, 1 in Denver, a teenager, 1 in Heflin, Alabama, a child, 1 in Riverside, California, 1 in Titusville, Florida, 1 in Holly Hill, Florida, 1 in Chicago, Illinois, 1 in Meigs County, Ohio, 1 in Pensacola, Florida, Fallon, Nevada, Faulkner, Arkansas, Toledo, Ohio, Austin, Texas, Detroit, Greenville, South Carolina, Annapolis, Maryland, Wichita, Kansas, Clover, South Carolina, Tacoma, Washington, and Dallas, Texas. Those 26 people died needlessly in gun violence, and that's the kind of stuff that happens every single day. Now,
we had some great guests with some great ideas. I have to tell you, before the show, I think I voiced during the show just being out of sorts and not knowing what to do. But a lot of the ideas, because my first reaction is an overreaction. I think a lot of people's are, to that kind of tragedy. And then you say, well, the extreme is impossible. Getting rid of all the guns is not possible. And I don't think most people want that.
Right. I mean, I can say it out of frustration and out of sadness about the events that have unfolded.
But then there are real
solutions
in terms of what, Cliff was talking about, the types of regulations that would work, things I'd never heard of. And then Rude Pundit's idea in terms of, not regulating the possession, rather the sale and distribution. Those are some brilliant ways to go about this conversation and debate going forward. It will be a debate because a lot of people are going to disagree. But there's some real positive things that could be done to stop this 30-some people a day.
Right. I mean, just getting rid of these assault weapons could seriously prevent mass shootings. Anybody who doesn't agree, go look at Australia. In the decade since, it's been more than a decade now, but in the decade since they outlawed these high-capacity weapons, they had no mass shooting events, none. I mean, that is an astounding statistic. They had 18 in the years moving up to that. So they were on par, on the same, record that we are here today. And they did something about it. We can do something about it here. I mean, since Columbine, there have been 61 mass murders. 61. It's just too many people. These are too many lives taken from us. And now we see children.
So the question is there a way to balance rights that are obviously in the Constitution versus the rights of people to live freely and safely?
I think
there is.
Organizations like Fix Gun Checks, requiring a mandatory background search. I think mandatory gun registration, including for guns that already are owned.
Right.
I think is really important. And
licensing, safety.
Yes.
Responsibility as well.
Absolutely.
Even for people who may be irresponsible, that there will be repercussions for irresponsibility beyond the actual horror of the event itself when guns are used irresponsibly.
Exactly.
There are accidents. I'm not talking about saying everyone's liable. There are accidents. Not want to be draconian here, but there is a way to balance the needs, I think, in a way. It's certainly out of balance right now. It is out of balance right now.
And the importance of mental health screenings and mental health care.
It's easier to get a gun than an appointment with a psychiatrist.
Yeah. It's easier to get mass quantities of bullets than to get sustained mental health care.
Right.
I think that is an alarming fact in our country. So again, I want to thank our great guests today. Cliff Schecter, you can follow him on Twitter at Cliff Schecter. You can check him out at libertasllc.com. Karl Frisch, all things Karl Frisch can be found at karlfrisch.com and on Twitter at Karl Frisch. And you can check out his great PR company, Bullfight Strategies. Him and Eric Burns do an amazing job there. And of course, the one, the only Dr. Rude Pundit at Rude Pundit on Twitter and online at rudepundit.blogspot.com, often featured on the Stephanie Miller Show, as well as Karl. And want to thank Nicole Sandler of RadioOrNot.com, George Rodriguez of SoFlo Radio, everybody over at We Act, Alex Lawson, Kimon Freeman, Pete Callahan, Rich Webster, Daniel Marins, David Schuster, Mike Hardiman for our awesome intro music. Of course, Shane for running the board and being a great co-host. And and of course, thanks to everybody who checks us out over at TalkingLeft.com and on Twitter and YouTube and iTunes at Talking Left. All available for free. And happy birthday, early birthday to Victor, the 18th. Everybody go wish him a happy birthday. He's one of our favorite listeners. And thanks to you for listening. We appreciate it. You guys are the reason we do what we do. Have a great Christmas. If we all survive 12/21/12, we'll see you back on the 30th. Thanks for listening.